Exhausted from a long day, a young man finally finishes his grueling work. Reflecting on 2 years of constant overtime, he begins to suspect he is trapped in a manipulative black company. Pausing with a heavy sigh, he realizes he is feeling dizzy from the sheer exhaustion. Walking through the dark streets, he suddenly remembers that it was on a night just like this when he found his little companion. Staring up at his apartment building in the night sky, he decides he needs to hurry inside. Takumi Haruka reaches his apartment door and unlocks it, eager to finally rest. Stepping into the dark entryway, he calls out a tired greeting to announce his return. Hearing scratching from inside, he chuckles at his pet's excitement and tells it to wait a second while he opens up. A tiny, incredibly fluffy dog greets him with sparkling eyes and joyful paws. Instantly comforted, Takumi gives the little dog a warm smile and asks if she was a good girl today. He happily reveals that he bought her favorite sausage as a special treat. He affectionately introduces the energetic little dog as Leo. Looking back fondly, he remembers naming her Leo before realizing she was a female, cherishing the memory regardless. Suddenly remembering his own dinner, he turns his attention toward the bento he brought home. Without warning, a wave of intense dizziness hits him, causing him to sway unsteadily as Leo watches in confusion. Feeling the ground shift beneath him, he wonders if an earthquake is striking as Leo barks in alarm. His vision blurring, he realizes there is no earthquake and that he is the only one swaying. Completely losing his balance, Takumi collapses heavily onto the floor. As his consciousness fades, the frantic sound of Leo's barking echoes in his ears. Blinking his eyes open, he finds himself lying on a bed of lush green grass. Taking in the vast mountain landscape around him, he groggily calls out for Leo. A thunderous bark suddenly shatters the silence, startling him completely. Snapping his head up, his eyes widen in absolute terror at the massive creature looming before him. He scrambles back in pure panic upon realizing a gigantic wolf is standing right in front of him. Desperately trying to rationalize the impossible sight, he convinces himself that this enormous beast must be a nightmare. The colossal creature leans in, prompting a terrified gasp from the helpless man. Staring directly into the massive jaws, he braces himself for certain death. Instead of biting, the terrifying beast enthusiastically licks his entire face with a massive tongue. Dripping with saliva, he stares in utter disbelief as the giant monster lets out a soft, familiar whine. Connecting the gentle behavior to his pet, he tentatively asks if this colossal creature is actually Leo. The giant beast's tail wags furiously in response, confirming his unbelievable suspicion. He gazes into the giant creature's innocent, sparkling eyes, recognizing the unmistakable soul of his tiny dog. Still reeling from the shock, he admits that his once tiny female dog now looks incredibly majestic. Reaching out to pet her massive snout, he marvels at just how gigantic she has become. Watching her tilt her huge head in confusion, he finds comfort in her familiar, endearing mannerisms. He reflects on how Leo always possessed a mysterious, almost human-like intelligence from the day they met. Standing beside her towering form in the dense forest, he continues to wonder if this bizarre size shift is just a vivid dream. Stroking her thick fur, he playfully suggests he could ride her now while questioning if she truly understands him. Responding with an eager bark, Leo agrees as Takumi decides they need to explore and figure out where they are. Together, the tiny human and his gigantic canine companion set off into the massive, uncharted forest to uncover the truth. Stepping cautiously into the unknown brush, Takumi begins his strange journey. Following the massive, fluffy form of his transformed dog, he ventures deeper into the thick woods. Gazing at the endless trees, he remarks that the forest just does not seem to ever end. Towering canopies stretch overhead, completely swallowing the sky in a sea of dark leaves. The sheer size difference between the two is striking as the giant white wolf easily overshadows her human companion. Worried about their lack of progress, he realizes they might be in a serious pickle if this continues. Feeling a dry ache in his throat, he wonders aloud if there is a river nearby, prompting an alert bark from Leo. Startled by her sudden reaction, he looks up as she lets out an eager woof. True to her instincts, the giant wolf successfully leads him straight to a clear, flowing stream. He showers her with praise, amazed that she intentionally brought him to the river on purpose. Crouching by the rocky bank, he eagerly reaches down toward the cool water. He drinks deeply, letting the refreshing water quench his desperate thirst. Wiping his mouth, he suggests they rest a bit by the riverbank. Resting beside her massive form, he reminisces about how she used to fit in his lap, whereas now just her head takes up all that space. He playfully notes how much heavier she is now, laughing warmly and apologizing as she gives an offended bark. The brief moment of levity fades as the harsh reality sets in and he wonders what his next move should be. Staring into the dense tree line, he reflects on how he suddenly found himself in this random forest before he even realized it. Overwhelmed by his complete lack of survival know-how, a heavy sigh escapes him as panic slowly creeps back in. Leaning back against Leo's soft fur, he tries to find a silver lining by appreciating the incredibly refreshing air. Closing his eyes, he realizes it has been a very long time since he last laid back and truly relaxed. Guilt washes over him as he apologizes to Leo for not spending much time with her because of work. He rests quietly beside his companion, finding comfort in her steady presence. Suddenly sensing a shift in her demeanor, he softly calls out her name in confusion. Her eyes narrow with fierce intensity as she growls, prompting a startled Takumi to ask if something is hiding in the forest. An imposing silhouette emerges from the trees, revealing a bizarre creature that looks exactly like a pig walking on two legs. His mind races as he recognizes the grotesque creature from video games, identifying the beast as a monster called an orc. Realizing the mythical danger is suddenly very real, he completely panics and confirms that the monster is indeed an orc. Terrified by the menacing monster, he scrambles for safety behind Leo's massive, protective frame. The monstrous beast raises its crude weapon, readying itself for a violent confrontation. Before the creature can act, Leo easily overpowers it and barks at Takumi, seemingly asking if he wants to eat it. The battle ends instantly as Takumi processes the overwhelming speed and strength of his beloved pet. The giant wolf practically shoves a massive chunk of fresh meat toward her terrified owner's face. Thoroughly defeated by the continuous stream of unrealistic events, he decides to just accept reality as it is. Shortly after, large chunks of mysterious meat sizzle appetizingly over a makeshift campfire. The warm flames crackle softly, casting a comforting glow over their impromptu campsite. Pulling a perfectly roasted skewer from the fire, he happily announces to the eager wolf that their meal is ready. Sitting cross-legged on the ground, he hesitantly prepares to take his first bite of the strange, otherworldly creature. Steeling his nerves, he chomps down hard on the thick piece of roasted monster meat. Chewing thoughtfully, his eyes light up in pleasant surprise as he realizes the meat is actually pretty good and tastes just like pork. A thin trail of smoke drifts peacefully up through the canopy, marking the end of a bizarre but successful first meal in this new world. Sitting by the river, Takumi looks up at his massive companion and asks how they might find their way out of the dense forest. Leo simply tilts her head and lets out a soft, questioning woof. Realizing she has no clue, he offers a defeated smile and notes that she doesn't know either. Deciding on a simple plan, he suggests they head along the river for now to find an exit. Leo barks enthusiastically in agreement as they begin their trek along the water's edge. Watching the giant wolf bound playfully ahead, Takumi smiles and remarks that she certainly seems to be in a good mood. Suddenly, Leo stops dead in her tracks with wide eyes, prompting a confused Takumi to ask what caught her attention. Takumi's own eyes widen in realization as he strains his ears and catches the faint sound of a voice echoing through the trees. Thrilled by the prospect of salvation, he breaks into a desperate sprint and yells for Leo to follow, convinced that finding this person is their ticket out of the woods. Bursting through the foliage, they discover a terrified girl in a dress pleading for help as a massive orc corners her. The grotesque monster raises its heavy wooden club high into the air, preparing to strike the helpless girl down. Without a second thought, Takumi points fiercely at the beast and screams Leo's name, unleashing his giant companion. The giant white wolf lunges forward with terrifying speed, intercepting the attack and completely overpowering the orc to save the trembling girl. Catching his breath, Takumi praises Leo for a job well done as the massive beast turns back to him with a proud bark. Turning his attention to the shaken survivor, he gently asks if she is alright. She stammers out a grateful reply, assuring him that she is somehow fine. Still sitting on the forest floor, the beautiful girl looks up at her rescuer with a flushed, captivated expression. Takumi freezes as they lock eyes, caught entirely off guard by her striking appearance. Mesmerized by how enchanting she is, he stares blankly until she nervously asks if something is wrong, snapping him back to reality with a flustered apology. Bowing her head, she thanks him profoundly for the rescue before curiously asking if the magnificent Silver Fenrir is his familiar. Takumi completely blanks at the fantasy terminology, repeating the words Silver Fenrir, in utter confusion as Leo tilts her giant head. He desperately asks what a familiar is, and his jaw drops when she explains it is a loyal monster that obeys its master's commands. Staring blankly ahead, Takumi begins to spiral as he realizes she is talking about the exact kinds of RPG monsters he used to fight in video games before bed. Utterly baffled, the rescued girl stares at Takumi and demands to know how he could possibly be ignorant about the existence of monsters. Gesturing toward the massive beast right beside him, she points out the obvious monster, but a confused Takumi redirects the conversation to ask what a Silver Fenrir is. Trying to keep the conversation grounded, Takumi points at his giant, fluffy companion and awkwardly asks if this is the mythical beast she is referring to. Her eyes sparkle with absolute awe as she confirms his suspicion, marveling at the sheer impossibility of him keeping a majestic Silver Fenrir as a familiar. She eagerly explains that these legendary monsters are renowned for their untamable nature and peerless strength, leaving a sweating Takumi to awkwardly question her claims. Glancing back at his docile companion with profound disbelief, Takumi struggles to accept that this goofy animal is supposedly the strongest creature alive. The girl passionately continues her recounting of local legends, listing the beast's terrifying abilities to slice through anything, spew fire, and outpace the roaring wind. Emphasizing the creature's absolute lethality, she notes that absolutely nothing can survive being crushed within its terrifying jaws. Delving into cultural history, she reveals that the beast's radiant silver hair is the ultimate symbol of strength and even adorns the royal family's national emblem. A sudden, heavy silence falls between them as the girl pauses, her wide eyes staring intently at her mysterious savior. Breaking the tension, Takumi warmly pats the giant wolf and declares her name is Leo, firmly stating that she is his cherished partner regardless of her legendary status. He casually dismisses her or by claiming to be a completely normal guy, leaving the stunned girl to silently question who on earth could command such a beast. Snapping out of her shock, she bursts into bright laughter and completely rejects his modest claim as absolute nonsense. Smiling brightly, she confidently asserts that a regular person could never possibly tame such a fearsome and majestic creature. Leaning in with piqued curiosity, she eagerly asks if her mysterious rescuer is actually a famous hero traveling in disguise. Takumi awkwardly waves off the assumption of fame, prompting the grateful survivor to politely ask for his name instead. Placing a hand on his chest, he offers a warm, disarming smile and formally introduces himself as Takumi Hiruka. Pondering the unfamiliar name aloud, she admits she has never heard of him, allowing Takumi to playfully prove his point about not being famous. A sudden realization hits Takumi as he remembers basic manners, prompting a calm glance from the giant wolf beside him. Turning his attention back to the beautiful survivor, he politely points out that she hasn't introduced herself yet and asks for her name. Realizing her oversight, the girl quickly apologizes for her lack of manners and straightens her posture. Bowing with profound respect, she expresses her deepest gratitude for his timely rescue and proudly introduces herself as Claire Rubert. Struck by her beauty, Takumi listens as the girl bows and introduces herself as Claire Rubert, thanking him for saving her life. Smiling warmly, she insists he just call her Claire, dropping the formalities as he awkwardly tries to address her. Finding his footing, Takumi requests that she call him by his first name as well, which she happily agrees to do. Curious about her situation, he asks what brought her out here, prompting Claire to explain that she came to the forest depths to gather herbs. Her expression dims slightly as she reveals that her horse ran away in terror the moment the vicious orcs appeared. Turning the question back on her savior, Claire curiously asks what Takumi is doing so deep in the woods. Caught completely off guard, he awkwardly stammers while trying to come up with a reasonable explanation. Deciding honesty is the best policy, he admits that he simply woke up and inexplicably found himself stranded in this strange forest. He adds that he had just been wandering around aimlessly with Leo before stumbling upon her. Claire stares back in silent disbelief, clearly struggling to comprehend how someone could just casually wake up in such a dangerous place. A thoughtful silence falls over them as Claire brings a hand to her chin to process his bizarre story. Breaking the quiet tension, she tentatively calls out his name to grab his attention. She nervously asks if she can make a request, and Takumi instantly agrees to help her with whatever she needs. Her face instantly lights up with immense relief as she claps her hands together and thanks him profusely. Above them, the dense forest canopy sways gently against the bright sky as their new alliance forms. The trio resumes their trek along the winding riverbank, keeping their eyes peeled for their target. Kneeling by the water's edge, Takumi asks to clarify if they are looking for a plant called ramogi. He carefully sifts through the tall, dense river grass to search for any signs of the medicinal herb. Claire confesses that she feels completely safe from monsters with him around, making the search for her medicine much easier. She explains that the dark green plant grows in clusters along the river and is desperately needed to treat fevers. Despite their efforts, Takumi admits he cannot find anything as the giant wolf excitedly splashes through the shallows. Exhaustion begins to set in as the two humans realize their riverside search is yielding absolutely no results. Taking a moment to breathe, they sit by the gently flowing water and share a light-hearted laugh at their fruitless situation. Dropping heavily onto the grassy bank, Takumi suggests they take a well-deserved break to recover their stamina. Just a few steps away, a cluster of peculiar dark green leaves rustles softly in the gentle breeze. Catching a glimpse of the foliage out of the corner of his eye, Takumi suddenly pauses his rest. He leans in closer to inspect the strange, jagged leaves poking out from the dirt. Recognizing the description Claire gave, he realizes with a shock that this strange plant must be the elusive Ramogi. He eagerly yells out to Claire that he found the medicine, prompting a shocked gasp from the resting girl. Carefully presenting the freshly plucked herb, he asks her to confirm if this is the right one. The three companions huddle closely together to inspect the dark green leaves with bated breath. Claire's face breaks into a relieved smile as she confirms that it is undoubtedly the rare Ramogi plant. Beaming with absolute gratitude, she thanks Takumi for making the impossible search a complete success. Wasting no time, he carefully gathers up the precious medicinal herbs and safely secures them for transport. With her mission accomplished, Claire tightens the laces of her dress and prepares herself for the journey back home. She bows deeply to express her gratitude once more, but Takumi humbly dismisses the praise and notes he was just happy to work together. Reality suddenly crashes down on Claire as she remembers her horse fled and she has absolutely no way to return home. Sensing her sudden distress, Leo lets out a soft bark, prompting Takumi to ask his giant companion what she is thinking. The massive Silver Fenrir gently lowers her gigantic body onto the soft grass right in front of the stranded girl. Realizing her intentions, Takumi smiles and asks if she is offering to act as their noble steed for the trip back. Sensing Claire's sudden hesitation, Takumi watches her face flush with a mix of surprise and unspoken emotion. Overcome with gratitude and a hint of guilt, she gently apologizes to the giant wolf for the heavy burden. Reassuring her with a powerful, echoing bark, Leo bounds forward with incredible speed. Gripping tightly onto the thick fur, the two riders share a thrilling moment of shared adrenaline as the wind whips past their faces. Raising his voice over the rushing wind, Takumi urgently asks the massive beast if she actually knows where she is going. The giant wolf completely ignores the question, carrying them effortlessly out of the dense, shadowy forest and into the open. Taking charge of the navigation, Claire points ahead and instructs their noble steed to turn slightly right and head straight down the dirt road. A determined look washes over Takumi's face as he braces himself against the wolf's rapidly accelerating momentum. Bursting out onto a sprawling hill, they are greeted by an endlessly stretching landscape with absolutely nothing but open fields as far as the eye can see. Staring at the bizarre, vast horizon, Takumi spirals into confusion as he realizes a place this expansive simply cannot exist in Japan. A heavy realization finally sets in as he concludes that, if this is not a vivid dream, they must have been transported to an entirely different world. Forcing himself to stop overthinking, he snaps back to reality just as Claire politely asks Leo to stop in front of an approaching gate. Panicked guards instantly raise their weapons at the terrifying beast until Claire yells for them to stand down, prompting the shocked men to frantically ask if she is alright. The heavily armored guards stutter in sheer terror at the towering monster, completely stunned to see their lady casually riding on its back. Swiftly regaining order, the captain commands his men to stand down and treat the newcomers as incredibly important guests. The massive iron gates swing wide open, allowing the giant wolf and her two riders to peacefully enter the heavily fortified estate. Takumi stares in absolute awe at the towering, castle-like mansion as Claire cheerfully invites him inside. Completely overwhelmed by the sheer ridiculous scale of her home, he gazes upward in silent disbelief while Leo lets out a satisfied bark. Claire gasps as Sebastian rushes forward, shouting her name in frantic relief. Claire smiles warmly, calling out for Sebastian while apologizing for the worry. Sebastian frets over what he would tell the master, urging Claire to explain her absence. Claire explains she went to the forest because Tilra is bedridden with a high fever. She notes no effective medicine exists in nearby towns or their own residents. Claire recounts nearly dying by an orc until Takumi intervened and saved her. Takumi humbly deflects the praise while Sebastian formally thanks him as butler. Sebastian freezes in sheer terror upon spotting the massive demonic beast nearby. Staring wide-eyed, the veteran butler struggles to process the legendary creature. Claire confirms it is a Silver Fenrir after watching Leo slash the orc. Sebastian marvels at witnessing the mythical guardian with his own eyes. He notes the inviolable beast serves as the sacred symbol of their entire country. Takumi casually corrects them, stating Leo is his partner rather than a familiar. Sebastian reels in utter disbelief at the absurd notion of picking one up. He questions how Takumi bypassed the protective parents of the family-oriented species. Takumi shrugs, claiming he found her in a box like a normal Maltese puppy. Sebastian short-circuits completely, failing to comprehend the absurd explanation. Leo pants innocently beside her bewildered master, completely unaware of the tension. Claire steps in to halt the intense questioning, deferring the interrogation for later. She proudly announces that Takumi successfully retrieved the vital Ramogi herb. Regaining his composure, Sebastian formally invites the group inside the grand estate. Sebastian bows deeply, gesturing toward the threshold to welcome their savior. The entire line of household servants assemble to welcome Claire home. Claire smiles brightly, urging Takumi to step inside the magnificent foyer. Takumi hesitates at the entrance, overwhelmed by the sheer luxury of the mansion. The assembled maids bow in perfect unison as Claire crosses the threshold. The opulent hallway stretches endlessly with disciplined attendants at attention. Takumi internally panics at the massive gathering of household staff. He estimates at least 20 attendants are standing at the ready. Claire hands the Ramogi over, ordering Sebastian to prepare the medicine immediately. She commands the staff to treat her savior with the utmost respect. Gelder and Lyra step forward, formally introducing themselves with nervous gratitude. The giant wolf gazes down intently at the trembling maids. Takumi awkwardly assures the frightened girls that he is just an ordinary guy. He internally admires the striking architecture of the grand entrance hall. Staring at the soaring ceilings, he marvels at the aristocratic scale of the home. Claire quickly excuses herself to check on her ailing sister upstairs. She sternly warns Lyra and Gelder to mind their manners with their guest. Claire rushes up the grand staircase with a determined stride. Takumi smiles softly, moved by her fierce devotion to her sick sister. Guiding the way, a servant invites Takumi and politely asks if his massive companion will be joining them in the living room. Assuring her it is perfectly fine, Takumi notes that the living room is spacious enough to easily accommodate all of them. Barking softly in agreement, Leo follows along as Takumi excuses himself and confidently steps deeper into the grand mansion. Arriving at their destination, the servant respectfully requests that they wait there for a moment. Offering to brew tea for Takumi, she politely inquires what kind of beverage his companion would prefer, prompting him to request water or milk. Readily understanding the request, she promises not to keep them waiting and hurries off to fetch the drinks. Waiting quietly in the lavish room, Takumi idly wonders if defaulting to such agreeable phrases is simply a deeply ingrained Japanese cultural trait. Observing his utterly relaxed companion, he reassures himself that as long as Leo senses no danger, they are perfectly safe. Still doubting his surreal reality, he contemplates if rescuing a beautiful woman and being welcomed into a magnificent mansion is simply too incredible to be true. Sensing his inner turmoil, the giant wolf lets out a soft bark to ground his wandering thoughts. Gazing at his impossibly massive friend, he admits that Leo's absurd new size makes it incredibly hard to completely write this off as a mere dream. A sudden knock abruptly interrupts his thoughts as the servant happily announces her return with the freshly brewed tea. Warmly inviting her inside, Takumi expresses his heartfelt gratitude as she carefully serves the steaming beverages. Stepping with utmost caution, the servant slowly approaches the imposing beast to set down her requested bowl of milk. Reminding his companion of her proper manners, Takumi tells Leo to say thank you before drinking, prompting a polite bark of acknowledgement. Startled by the sheer, booming volume of the giant wolf's voice, the poor servant visibly flinches in pure terror. Trembling violently under the beast's gaze, she timidly gestures for the massive creature to go ahead and drink. Realizing she inadvertently frightened the girl, the gentle giant carefully lowers her heavy head to quietly lap up her drink. Apologizing for the sudden scare, Takumi gently assures the frightened servant, Gelder, that Leo never attacks people. Still visibly shaken, Gelder bows her head as she is subtly scolded for displaying such fearful etiquette toward an honored guest. Waving off the strict formality, Takumi laughs that he is not angry at all, fully understanding exactly why people are intimidated by Leo's terrifying appearance. Pointing out the endearing irony, he explains that despite her terrifyingly massive body, Leo was actually trying to make soft noises so she would not frighten Gelder. Smiling warmly at the servant, he casually adds that Leo is just a cute girl like Gelder, instantly causing the maid to blush deeply. Flustered by unexpectedly being called cute, Gelder listens intently as Takumi kindly asks her not to be afraid of his gentle companion. Regaining her flustered composure, the servant eagerly nods her head and promises to treat the giant wolf with much less fear. Chuckling at the charming interaction, a new voice amusedly notes that Takumi seems quite skilled at sweet-talking women. Turning his attention toward the door, Takumi warmly greets Claire as she gracefully enters the room and apologizes for keeping him waiting. Settling into the serious conversation, Takumi immediately asks about her sister's current condition following their harrowing encounter in the forest. Relieving his lingering worries, Claire explains that her sister is doing well and that they are currently preparing the medicinal Ramogi herb he found. Expressing her absolute deepest gratitude once again, she thanks him profoundly before nervously shifting to a much more serious tone. Looking at him with intense determination, Claire politely asks if he would be willing to reveal the absolute truth of his mysterious origins. Assuring him she knows he is a good person, she points out his baffling, almost impossible ignorance regarding common monsters and the legendary Silver Fenrir. Leaning forward intently, she firmly states that absolutely anyone who actually lives in this country would naturally possess such basic, everyday knowledge. Sighing softly in defeat, Takumi openly admits that her sharp suspicions regarding his strange lack of knowledge are entirely justified. Backpedaling slightly out of politeness, Claire apologizes and assures him that her questions are born purely out of curiosity and he does not have to answer. Blinking in genuine surprise, Takumi tilts his head and asks what exactly made her so intensely curious about him in the first place. Gesturing openly toward his body, she plainly states that she has never seen anything resembling the bizarre garments he is currently wearing. Looking down at his modern business suit, Takumi suddenly realizes exactly how utterly alien and out of place his attire must look in this fantasy world. Confessing her sheer bewilderment, she admits she cannot help but wonder what kind of man wears such alien clothes while commanding a mythical beast. Rubbing the back of his neck anxiously, Takumi hesitates and warns her that she might not actually believe the absurd truth he is about to tell. Smiling with absolute confidence, Claire insists that after watching a legendary Silver Fenrir obey his commands, she is fully prepared to believe anything. Nodding in deep appreciation of her open-mindedness, Takumi takes a steadying breath and agrees to tell her everything. Gathering his scattered thoughts, he decides to start from the very beginning, explaining how he first woke up completely lost in the dense forest. Explaining his awakening in the woods, Takumi notes that one specific thing truly surprised him. A sudden flashback emphasizes the sheer magnitude of this unexpected surprise. Standing tall and majestic, his once tiny companion Leo had grown to an unfathomable size. Claire politely points out that it is entirely obvious for a legendary Fenrir to be massively large, assuming he simply lacked basic knowledge about the beast. Gesturing with his hands to show her original proportions, Takumi explains that Leo used to be a tiny dog he could easily pick up. Startled by this revelation, Claire asks if it is truly possible that he found and raised the abandoned pup just a few years ago. Nodding in confirmation, he emphasizes that her past size and shape were completely different from the giant beast standing before them now. Staring thoughtfully, Takumi theorizes that his little dog must have somehow transformed into a legendary Silver Fenrir. Frowning in deep confusion, Claire admits she has never once heard of any normal creature transforming into such a mythical beast. Scratching his head nervously, Takumi hesitates as he struggles to find the right words to explain his absurd situation. Bracing himself for her reaction, he bluntly confesses his belief that he actually comes from an entirely different world. Claire visibly recoils in sheer bewilderment, repeating the phrase as she tries to process the impossible claim. Explaining the stark differences, Takumi points out that in his original world, terrifying monsters like orcs only existed in fictional stories. Offering an understanding smile, he assures her that it is no wonder she struggles to believe his wild story right away. A brief moment of heavy silence fills the room as Claire deeply processes the overwhelming influx of information. Recalling familiar tropes from his homeland, Takumi explains that travelers to another world are often granted special powers in the stories he knows. Glancing over at his massive companion, he theorizes that this otherworldly phenomenon might be the exact reason for Leo's drastic change. Connecting the dots, Claire realizes he implies that the little dog gained immense power upon entering this world and became a Silver Fenrir. The majestic beast simply sits quietly, calmly observing the humans as they unravel the mystery of her legendary transformation. Claire stares intensely at the young man, carefully weighing the sincerity in his eyes against the absolute absurdity of his tale. Breaking the heavy tension, Sebastian steps forward to carefully address his young mistress regarding the bizarre confession. Interrupting her loyal servant with a confident smile, Claire announces that she has decided to fully believe Takumi's incredible story. Taken aback by her quick acceptance, Takumi blinks in pure surprise at her unwavering trust. Chiming in enthusiastically, the rest of the household staff loudly voice their agreement, praising Claire's excellent judgment of character. Smiling with deep gratitude, Takumi warmly thanks Claire for choosing to place her faith in him. Leaning in with renewed interest, Claire smoothly transitions the conversation to address his current predicament. Pointing out that he lacks connections and support in this unfamiliar world, she generously offers him a place to stay in her lavish mansion. Adding to the incentive, she confidently states that her younger sister Turla will definitely want to thank him personally once she recovers. Though initially hesitant to impose, Takumi gratefully accepts her kind hospitality and agrees to take her up on the generous offer. Springing into action with a joyful clap, Claire immediately orders Sebastian to hurry and prepare a guest room. Shifting topics, Takumi asks about the Ramogi medicine for Turla, prompting Claire to explain that it must be dried and will not be ready until tomorrow afternoon. Surprised by the time frame, Takumi questions if one stalk is truly enough, to which Claire happily confirms it is completely sufficient to cure the illness. Recalling his massive harvest, Takumi realizes that the 5 stalks he originally provided were actually far more than they needed. A sudden commotion draws their attention as the giant wolf begins eagerly pawing and whining. Gently scolding his massive pet, Takumi tells her that she cannot eat random things and guesses that she must be getting extremely hungry. Seizing the perfect opportunity, Claire excitedly announces that they will host a grand welcome party for Takumi and Leo today. Completely caught off guard by the escalating hospitality, Takumi stammers as he tries to process the idea of a sudden celebration. Turning to the practical matters of the feast, Claire asks what Leo prefers to eat, prompting Takumi to nervously inquire if this world has sausages. Clasping her hands together in delight, Claire confirms that they indeed have sausages, instantly brightening the mood. Turning to his giant companion with a massive grin, Takumi excitedly declares that she gets to eat her absolute favorite sausages tonight. Looking affectionately at his massive companion, Takumi asks if she is genuinely happy with their new arrangement. A brief moment of peaceful silence settles between them as they relax in the lavish living room. Suddenly, a flustered maid hastily excuses herself as she hurries past them. Glancing down at the table, Takumi curiously inspects the medicinal herb prepared for the sick girl. Noticing something incredibly strange, he calls out to Claire to draw her attention to the plant. He points out that the Ramogi herb, which was perfectly normal a moment ago, has inexplicably and suddenly dried completely. Realizing the miraculous implications, he excitedly asks if the fully cured herb can be used as medicine right away. Thrilled by this impossible stroke of luck, Claire enthusiastically confirms and declares she will fetch Sebastian immediately. Wasting no time, she swiftly dashes down the hallway to deliver the wonderful news. Turning to his gigantic pet, Takumi softly apologizes and explains that her promised sausage dinner will be delayed just a bit longer. Scratching his head in sheer bewilderment, he wonders aloud what exactly triggered the herb's instantaneous transformation. Oblivious to the magical mystery, the giant wolf simply pants happily in anticipation of her upcoming meal. Returning with an overjoyed smile, Claire profusely thanks Takumi for miraculously enabling her to prescribe the medicine to Turla. Relieved by the excellent news, he warmly expresses his hopes for her younger sister's speedy recovery. Stepping forward, Sebastian respectfully notes that Lady Claire claimed the Ramogi instantly dried the exact moment Takumi touched it. Recalling the precise sequence of events, Takumi explains that the herb miraculously dried as soon as he picked it up off the floor. Relaying her recent conversation with the butler, Claire excitedly suggests that Takumi might actually possess a rare divine gift. Educating the bewildered guest, Sebastian explains that these divine blessings are bestowed upon only 1 in a million children. Elaborating on the world's history, he adds that there are numerous legendary records of past gift holders within their country. He details how these immense powers often manifest as overwhelming magical aptitude or peerless crafting skills capable of forging devastating weapons. Intrigued by the sudden mention of sorcery, Takumi eagerly asks for more details regarding the concept of magic. Concluding his theory, Sebastian confidently states that since no known spell instantly dries plants, Takumi's ability must unquestionably be a divine gift. Connecting the phenomenon to his otherworldly origins, Claire deduces that the gods must have granted him special powers upon entering their realm. Frowning slightly, Takumi wonders why his supposed divine blessing is merely a weird, hyper-specific ability to dry out plants. Reassuring him, Claire theorizes that the drying effect might simply be one tiny fraction of a much more versatile and powerful ability. She eagerly proposes that they seek out specialized magical tools later to accurately measure and determine the true nature of his capabilities. Marveling at the sheer convenience of a fantasy world, Takumi expresses his excitement over finding such a useful magical device. Transitioning perfectly on cue, a maid respectfully interrupts to announce that their highly anticipated dinner is finally ready. Clutching his rumbling stomach, Takumi gratefully admits that both he and Leo are practically starving. Following an incredibly satisfying feast, Takumi compliments the delicious meal while Claire promises to pass his high praises to the chef. Hoping to make him feel completely at home, Claire generously offers to answer absolutely any questions he might have about their unfamiliar world. Wasting no time, Takumi immediately steers the conversation toward the highly fascinating subject of magic. Tilting her head in slight confusion, Claire asks what exactly he wishes to know about such a common everyday topic. Flailing his hands defensively, Takumi bluntly reveals the shocking truth that magic absolutely did not exist in his previous world. Wide-eyed and completely fascinated, Claire leans in closer as she processes this impossible revelation. She loudly voices her absolute astonishment at the mere concept of a civilization surviving without a trace of magic. Clarifying his original reality, Takumi explains that while magical spells frequently exist in fiction, no human can actually cast them. Stunned by this immense cultural divide, Claire quietly marvels at how completely different his homeland is from theirs. Eager to educate her otherworldly guest, she promptly delegates the task of explaining magic to her highly knowledgeable butler. The loyal Sebastian steps forward with a warm smile, fully prepared to teach the bewildered visitor the fundamental absolute basics of magic. Observing the butler's eagerness, Takumi casually notes that Sebastian certainly seems to enjoy explaining things. Stepping into his element, Sebastian explains that magic is simply the physical exercise of innate magical power, a vital energy present within every single living creature. He elaborates that merely possessing this power isn't enough. True magic requires gathering and channeling that internal energy into the outside world using specific spoken spells. Detailing the elemental affinities of fire, water, wind, and earth, the butler mentions that ancient texts even describe mags chanting day and night to unleash massive, large-scale miracles. Curious about the practical application of this system, Takumi asks the knowledgeable butler for an example of the absolute easiest spell a person can cast. Pausing to think for a moment, Sebastian carefully considers the best way to physically demonstrate this basic concept. Raising his hand, the butler confidently recites a short incantation to summon a minor fire elemental candle. A tiny, controlled flame instantly flickers to life above his palm, serving as a perfect example of a common spell widely utilized in everyday households. Impressed by the practical display, Takumi likens the convenient little flame to the everyday magic of a modern lighter. Thinking critically about real combat, he points out that lengthy chants would be incredibly dangerous when facing aggressive monsters, especially since stronger spells require exponentially longer incantations. Acknowledging the glaring vulnerability in standard casting, Sebastian firmly agrees with Takumi's sharp tactical observation. The butler quickly notes that true magical masters overcame this exact fatal flaw by developing a highly advanced, alternative technique. Intrigued by the strategic concept, Takumi eagerly asks if he is referring to the legendary ability to cast magic completely without incantations. Suddenly, a loud thud echoes through the room as the heavy door swings completely open and a young girl excitedly calls out for her sister. Startled by the sudden noisy intrusion, Takumi turns his head to see a small, energetic figure bursting into the room. Rushing directly toward Claire, the young girl happily presents herself to her beloved older sibling after finally recovering from her illness. Smiling warmly at the energetic child, Claire formally introduces the energetic newcomer to Takumi as her younger sister, Turla. Gazing at his transformed companion, Takumi warmly assures Leo that she is still the exact same friend despite her massive new appearance. Bursting excitedly into the room, a young girl rushes to Claire to announce that she is finally feeling much better. Startled by the sudden energetic intrusion, Claire lets out a soft sigh of exasperation. Turning her attention back to her guest, Claire politely apologizes to Takumi for the abrupt interruption. Clinging to her older sister, the energetic girl suddenly stops and curiously looks over at the strange man sitting in the room. Pointing directly at the unfamiliar guest, she bluntly asks Claire who exactly he is. Claire proudly explains that their honored guest saved her from a brutal orc attack and miraculously found the cure for the illness. Offering a gentle smile, the young man introduces himself as Takumi Haruka and warmly tells her it is nice to meet her. Bouncing with enthusiasm, the young girl happily introduces herself as Turla Liebert and insists he just call her Turla. Shifting to a stern tone, Claire orders her sister back to bed, but Turla whines that she has already been sleeping the entire time. Siding with the energetic child, Takumi points out that it is completely natural to struggle with sleep right after recovering from an illness. Defeated by their combined logic, Claire rubs her forehead and sighs at her stubborn little sister. A sudden, booming bark echoes through the room, instantly shattering the casual conversation. Freezing in absolute terror, Turla slowly turns her head toward the source of the massive sound. Staring up at the towering beast, she points a trembling finger and frantically screams at her sister about the giant dog. Calmly correcting her frightened sibling, Claire reminds her that the majestic creature is actually the legendary Silver Fenrir. Stepping in to ease her fears, Takumi softly explains that the giant wolf is simply his gentle friend named Leo. Lowering her massive head, the giant wolf slowly approaches the trembling child to offer a friendly greeting. Completely overwhelmed by a flurry of giant dog kisses, Turla squeals in a mix of surprise and pure delight. Chuckling at the adorable scene, Takumi mentions that Leo has always absolutely loved playing with children. Glancing nervously at her sister, Turla asks for permission to play, which Claire happily grants since Takumi approves. Throwing her arms around the fluffy beast, the young girl giggles endlessly as she rolls around with her new giant friend. Watching her sister beam with joy, Claire turns to Takumi and expresses her profound, heartfelt gratitude. Smiling back at the noblewoman, Takumi admits that he is simply glad to see the young girl laughing again. Gazing fondly at the playful duo, Claire silently marvels at how incredibly happy her little sister looks. Later that evening, a polite maid bids Takumi good night and advises him to get some well-deserved rest. Flopping heavily onto the soft mattress, the exhausted young man stares up at the unfamiliar ceiling. Letting out a heavy sigh, he quietly reflects on the absolute chaos of the day's incredible events. Succumbing to his overwhelming fatigue, he quickly drifts off into a deep and peaceful slumber. Curled up comfortably on the floor nearby, his faithful companion Leo also rests soundly after their long journey. Floating in the space between dreams, Takumi finally accepts that this magical world is his new, permanent reality. Awakened the next morning by an excited bark, a groggy Takumi buries his face in the pillows and begs for just a little more sleep. A soft giggle fills the room as an amused voice playfully notes that Takumi is clearly not a morning person. Snapping wide awake in sheer panic, Takumi bolts upright upon realizing Claire is standing right inside his bedroom. Blushing slightly at his frantic reaction, Claire warmly wishes him a good morning and asks if he slept well. Flustered beyond belief, he stammers out a hurried greeting while internally wishing she had just woken him up normally. Ignoring his embarrassment, Claire politely announces that breakfast is ready and invites him down to the dining room. Down the hall, Turla whines that she wants to stay and play with Leo, but Claire firmly tells her it is time to eat. Chuckling at the girl's boundless energy, Takumi notes how deeply attached Turla has already become to the giant wolf. Beaming with admiration, Turla declares that Takumi is a great guy for bringing Leo and excitedly tells him to call her whatever he likes. A loud growl erupts from Turla's stomach, instantly embarrassing the energetic young girl in front of everyone. Clutching her noisy stomach, she groans quietly in flustered embarrassment. Smiling at the cute interruption, Takumi cheerfully announces that they will take her to the dining room right away. Closing his bedroom door behind him, Takumi suddenly realizes he doesn't have a fresh change of clothes for the day. Giving his outfit a quick sniff test, he asks his massive companion if the smell is acceptable, and Leo barks her approval. Staring blankly ahead, a sudden realization hits him about another missing part of his morning routine. Rubbing his rough chin, he notes that he lacks a razor to shave his beard and resolves to ask Sebastian for assistance later. Snapped out of his thoughts by an impatient bark from Leo, he frantically rushes down the hall to catch up. Bursting into the dining area, Takumi loudly apologizes to the group for keeping them waiting. Pulling out a chair, the loyal butler Sebastian politely wishes their honored guest a good morning. Now that everyone has finally gathered, Claire formally kicks off the breakfast, prompting a joyful cheer from Turla. The group settles in to enjoy the lavish and peaceful morning meal prepared by the estate staff. Savoring the excellent flavors, they all cheerfully dig into the beautifully plated dishes. Sitting on the floor nearby, the giant wolf eagerly chows down on her own massive, delicious breakfast. Finishing up his meal, Takumi wipes his mouth and carefully sets down his utensils. Turning his attention away from the table, he politely calls out to Sebastian to ask for a quick favor. He respectfully requests a spare change of clothes from the estate, along with a razor to finally shave his messy beard. Bowing deeply in apology for his oversight, Sebastian promises to prepare the requested items and bring them straight to his room. Wiping her mouth clean, Turla finishes her food and practically vibrates with renewed energy. Slamming her hands on the table, she excitedly announces to her older sister that she is finally ready to play with Leo. Glancing down at the cleanly licked bowl, Takumi confirms that his giant furry friend has also finished her meal. Turning to his host, he politely asks Claire if the energetic young girl and the massive wolf are allowed to go play. Cheering loudly at the immediate approval, Turla eagerly invites her giant companion to run wild in the backyard. Needing to freshen up, Takumi asks Claire to watch over Leo while he returns to his room, and she happily agrees. Watching the young man walk away, Claire softly asks the legendary beast if she is truly okay being separated from her master, receiving a confident bark in return. Tilra excitedly calls for Leo to follow her outside, while Claire politely tells Takumi she will see him later. Watching the energetic group head off, Takumi turns his attention back to his personal morning routine. Returning to his assigned quarters, he is warmly greeted by the polite maid Lyra. Thanking her for her dedicated assistance, he gratefully receives the fresh set of clothes she specifically prepared for him. Handing him an unfamiliar razor, she informs him that the archaic tool is meant for shaving his overgrown beard. Before gracefully exiting the room, Lyra bows respectfully and instructs him to call for her if he requires anything else. Left entirely alone, Takumi stares blankly at the strange medieval razor while seriously doubting his ability to use it properly. Wincing as he touches his freshly shaven face, he attributes his minor nicks to simply being completely unaccustomed to the blade. Splashing clean water on his skin, he notes a mild stinging sensation but ultimately accepts the decent shaving results. Stepping out into the sunlit courtyard, he hears the joyful giggling of Tilra as she happily plays with his giant companion. Turning toward his approaching footsteps, Claire looks absolutely astonished and immediately points out how incredibly different he looks. Admiring his clean-shaven face and neatly groomed appearance, she warmly compliments his incredibly refreshed and handsome look. Smiling gratefully at her praise, he thanks her as she confidently notes how perfectly the new outfit suits him. Turning his attention to the nearby butler, Takumi expresses his profound gratitude to Sebastian for arranging the fine attire. Bowing with absolute grace, the humble butler assures the young man that he is always perfectly happy to help. Shifting the mood, Takumi expresses his immense relief regarding Tilra's recovery, prompting Claire to gratefully credit his miraculous discovery of the Ramogi herb. A sudden, chilling aura emanates from Sebastian as the butler sternly reminds Claire of her incredibly reckless decision to run into the dangerous forest alone. Shrinking nervously under her servant's intense glare, Claire obediently promises to be much more careful and avoid causing future worry. Playfully doubting her sincerity, Takumi teasingly asks if she is truly going to stop worrying them, causing her to nervously laugh off the accusation. Chuckling at her predictable evasion, Sebastian calmly suggests that Takumi should have scolded the reckless young lady much harder. Watching her pout defensively at the scolding, Takumi smiles warmly and casually admits that he actually finds her quite cute. Completely stunned by the sudden compliment, Claire blushes furiously as she silently processes the fact that he just called her cute. Flailing her hands in extreme embarrassment, she frantically insists nothing is wrong when a bewildered Takumi asks about her sudden, flustered silence. Bowing respectfully, the estate servants eagerly pray for Lady Claire and Takumi to have a safe journey. Stepping forward with confident authority, Claire officially announces their departure. Standing by the carriage, a deeply displeased Tilura crosses her arms and pouts heavily at being left behind. Takumi notes they are heading to town for new clothes, recalling how Claire strictly ordered the recently recovered Tilura to stay home despite her protests. Sitting inside the rattling carriage, Takumi asks Claire if she is truly certain about covering his expenses. Smiling warmly, she assures him that he does not need to worry about money and insists on paying for everything. Bowing his head gratefully, Takumi apologizes for the trouble and thanks her for going completely out of her way to help him. Changing the subject, he glances out the carriage window and brings up their previous conversation. Stroking the panting Leo beside him, Takumi reminds Claire about their discussion regarding divine gifts. Noting her attentive response, he asks if they will be able to properly analyze his suspected gift in the town they are visiting. Confirming they absolutely can, Claire promises to guide him to the proper establishment right after purchasing his necessities. Satisfied with the structured plan, Takumi nods in agreement as the carriage rolls onward. Staring thoughtfully ahead, he internally wonders about the true, exact nature of these mysterious abilities. Adding to his knowledge, Claire explains that while gifts grant various powers, absolutely no one knows why people get them or what common traits awaken them. She elaborates that while some demonstrate their powers immediately after birth, others live entire lifetimes without realizing their dormant abilities. Looking at him with deep sincerity, she firmly states that the only thing that truly matters is how a person chooses to wield their unique power. Moved by her wise and practical perspective, Takumi readily agrees with her sentiment. Suddenly, a massive snout begins aggressively sniffing at Claire, prompting Takumi to quickly scold his giant companion for being naughty. Arriving at their destination, the grand stone walls of the bustling town finally loom before them. Stepping off the vehicle, Sebastian politely asks them to wait while he takes his leave to securely park the carriage. Standing at the town entrance, Takumi gazes in absolute awe at the sprawling urban landscape. Observing the endless stream of chatting townsfolk and lively stalls, he marvels at the incredibly bustling atmosphere. Stepping beside him, Claire asks for his initial impressions of the lively town of Raktos. Agreeing that the area is surprisingly crowded for just the outer gate, he admits he is completely overwhelmed by the sheer number of people. Claire explains that Raktos used to be much quainter before it gained massive traction as the sole route connecting the outer regions to the capital. Intrigued by the strategic choke point, Takumi curiously questions why it is considered the absolute only safe route. She clarifies that the primary reason for this bottleneck is that the surrounding landscape is completely dominated by treacherous forests and mountains. Drawing a mental map, she details how monster-infested forests stretch south and west, while perilous mountains block the north, leaving Raktos as the only passage. Their geography lesson concludes as Sebastian returns, apologizing for the wait and suggesting they begin browsing for Takumi's needs. Following the loyal butler's lead, the group slowly makes their way through the lively, crowded streets. Passing through a massive archway, they finally enter the sprawling commercial hub of the town. Gesturing to the endless rows of vendors, Sebastian introduces the vibrant area as the largest market in Raktos. Taking in the vibrant sights, Claire notes that her estate usually purchases all their cooking ingredients and foodstuffs from this very location. Suddenly, Leo begins violently quivering and drooling at the surrounding scents, prompting Takumi to desperately hold the massive beast back. The giant wolf lets out a depressed whine and sags toward the ground as her master physically restrains her from lunging at a food stall. Chuckling at the chaotic display, Claire asks if Leo loves sausages, to which Takumi warns that the beast will make a mad dash for them if they aren't careful. Smiling brightly at the massive pet, Claire generously promises her a large helping of sausages for dinner, earning a joyous, booming bark in return. Steering them back on track, Sebastian politely suggests they head down the road to visit the local tailor and finally address Takumi's wardrobe. Approaching a sturdy wooden door, they push it open and step directly into the quaint clothing shop. An older merchant immediately turns from his counter, brightly welcoming Lady Claire and her companions into his establishment. Greeting the tailor Harton, Claire requests a set of custom clothes for Takumi, prompting the shopkeeper to happily fetch his tools. Startled by the extravagant request, Takumi echoes the word tailor, questioning if she truly intends to buy him custom-made garments. Turning to Claire, Takumi politely declines the lavish offer, insisting that he is perfectly comfortable settling for ready-made clothing. Staring back in absolute shock, Claire is visibly stunned by the mere revelation that ready-made clothes actually exist. Stepping in to bridge the cultural gap, Sebastian politely explains to his mistress that most commoners buy pre-made garments rather than paying for perfect tailoring. Blinking in pure disbelief at this foreign concept, Claire quietly admits that she has only ever worn custom-tailored outfits her entire life. Sweating nervously at this casual display of immense wealth, Takumi internally remarks that she sounds exactly like a true aristocrat. Seeking a much more humble option, Takumi politely asks the tailor to point out the ready-made section, and Harton happily guides him over. Frowning in genuine confusion, Claire mutters that she still sees absolutely no reason for him to settle for cheap, pre-made garments. Refusing to let his financial guilt grow, Takumi internally vows that he will absolutely not let her buy luxurious custom clothes and add to his massive debt. Examining the racks of clothing, Takumi carefully browses through the shop's selection of standard, ready-made shirts. Refusing to yield entirely on the matter, Claire passionately insists that proper clothing is a strict necessity and demands he receive at least one custom-tailored set. Concluding the transaction, Harton informs the group that the custom garments will be ready within a week and warmly asks them to return then. Bowing respectfully, both Sebastian and Claire express their gratitude to the tailor for his excellent service. Waving cheerfully from his storefront, the tailor bids the departing group farewell and invites them to visit again. Guiding them down the bustling street, Sebastian notes they can buy Takumi's general belongings ahead, just as a rugged voice suddenly calls out to them. Emerging from the shadows, a shady thug eyes them up and down, mockingly pointing out what a fancy-looking group they make. Stepping fully into the daylight, the intimidating rogue glares menacingly at the wealthy travelers. Flashing a greedy grin at Claire's expensive dress, the thug claims his gang is strapped for cash and demands the filthy rich group hand over their money. Immediately recognizing the threat, Sebastian swiftly steps in front of his mistress, throwing his arm out to shield her while calmly ordering her to stand back. Laughing mockingly, the thug leader boasts that his group of 6 easily outnumbers them and asks if they truly want to fight. Takumi internally groans at how incredibly cliché the bandits are acting, just as one of the thugs suddenly chokes mid-laugh. The thugs suddenly stop their arrogant chuckling as they notice a massive shadow looming directly over them. Glaring fiercely, the giant Silver Fenrir named Leo steps protectively in front of her beloved master. Flinching in sheer terror, the thugs stumble backward and shout in absolute disbelief at the impossibly large wolf. Trying to save face, the trembling leader grits his teeth and arrogantly claims the giant beast doesn't scare him. Before the bandit can react, Leo violently snaps her massive jaws and effortlessly crushes their weapons to pieces. Spitting out the broken debris with a soft bark, Leo receives a gentle pat from Takumi as he softly reminds her not to eat inedible objects. Utterly terrified by the casual display of monstrous strength, the thugs immediately drop to their knees in utter defeat. Glancing down at the groveling bandits, Takumi calmly asks Claire how they should handle the situation. Taking immediate charge, Claire orders her loyal butler to fetch the town guard to apprehend the criminals. Takumi wonders aloud if ruffians are a common sight, noting that he expected the guards to be far more vigilant in such a busy town. Claire explains that a few opportunistic bandits do operate in the area, specifically targeting vulnerable merchants and wealthy travelers. Bound tightly with rope, the furious thugs curse loudly and scream empty threats at their captors. Leo simply glares down at the screaming bandits, instantly silencing their pathetic threats with her terrifying presence. Rushing frantically onto the scene, a group of armed town guards arrives and immediately apologizes for their delayed response. Stepping forward, the lead guard quickly assesses the situation and confirms that the tied-up men are indeed the notorious robbers. Bowing deeply to Lady Claire, the guards profusely apologize for their negligence and promise to arrest the thugs without delay. Dragging the defeated bandits to their feet, the guards swiftly march the complaining criminals away toward the local jail. Breathing a heavy sigh of relief, Takumi relaxes his tense shoulders now that the chaotic ordeal is finally over. Claire apologizes for unintentionally using Leo to intimidate the thugs, but Takumi warmly reassures her that the giant wolf happily jumped into the fray on her own. Brushing past the minor incident with an elegant smile, Claire smoothly suggests that they resume their shopping trip. Just as they prepare to leave, a hesitant voice suddenly calls out from behind to grab Takumi's attention. Turning around, Takumi sees a stranger nervously asking if they can spare just a little bit of their time. A quiet figure lingers just outside the group's immediate vicinity. Hesitantly stepping forward, the stranger politely excuses herself to get their attention. She carefully asks Takumi if the massive wolf standing right beside him is his magically bound familiar. Shifting her anxious gaze, she timidly inquires if the elegant woman accompanying them is the noble Lady Claire. Takumi smiles warmly as he prepares to address the woman's perfectly reasonable curiosity. He confirms Claire's identity and affectionately clarifies that Leo is actually his trusted partner rather than a mere familiar. Claire smoothly steps forward, asking the stranger if there is a specific problem they can help with. Realizing she is speaking directly to nobility, the woman bows deeply and apologizes for her delayed show of respect. Claire waves off the strict formality, explaining that she is merely visiting the bustling town on personal business. Humbly insisting they drop the grand titles, she tells everyone present that there is absolutely no need to pay her such deep respects. Pausing mid-sentence, Claire suddenly registers her own phrasing and looks up in absolute confusion. Takumi violently jolts in shock upon realizing a massive, silent crowd of curious townsfolk has completely surrounded them. Fidgeting nervously under the intense spotlight, the woman politely asks Claire if the giant beast is exactly the monster she suspects it to be. Claire casually glances at Takumi, giving him full permission to reveal the absolute truth to the tense crowd. Taking the cue, Takumi steps up to directly address the nervous townsfolk. Before revealing Leo's true identity, he gently asks the frightened woman for her name. Stammering slightly under the immense pressure, she nervously introduces herself as Emeralda. Glancing anxiously at the massive beast, Emeralda cautiously explains her terrifying deduction to the group. Noting the wolf's lustrous silver coat, enormous size, and ability to effortlessly shatter steel, she admits she strongly suspects the creature is a legendary Silver Fenrir. Claire confirms the terrifying truth but quickly assures the trembling woman that she is perfectly safe. The surrounding crowd breaks into frantic chatter as Emeralda fearfully asks if the noblewoman is telling the absolute truth. Stepping in to calm the rising panic, Takumi gently reassures them that Leo possesses an incredibly sweet and gentle soul. Despite his comforting words, Emeralda stammers as she struggles to overcome her deeply ingrained survival instincts. She points out that Silver Fenrirs are universally known as utterly ferocious monsters, making his claims of docility nearly impossible to believe. Responding to her master's cue, the giant wolf lets out a remarkably soft and friendly bark. The massive beast affectionately rubs her huge head against Takumi to visibly prove her completely harmless nature. He logically argues that her peaceful stroll through their bustling town without causing a single incident should be absolute proof that she means no harm. Takumi internally sweats as Sebastian smugly whispers about how he ruthlessly persuaded the town guards to completely ignore the dangerous beast. Breaking through the lingering tension, Claire warmly invites Emeralda to step closer and judge the wolf for herself. Takumi offers an encouraging smile as the terrified woman hesitantly takes a trembling step forward. Reaching out with a shaking hand, Emeralda gently strokes the giant beast's thick, luxurious fur. Feeling the terrifying wolf lean affectionately into her gentle touch, her absolute terror instantly melts into pure relief. Marveling at the impossibly soft coat, she joyfully admits she could easily get used to petting such a legendary creature. Takumi beams with absolute pride, completely agreeing with her high praise of Leo's wonderful fur. Adding further reassurance, Claire proudly announces that the magnificent beast is a fully welcomed guest at her own private estate. Bowing respectfully, Emeralda agrees that the noblewoman's prestigious endorsement completely erases any lingering public doubts. Apologizing for her earlier panic, she smiles brightly as Takumi happily forgives the completely understandable fear. A collective, hesitant murmur suddenly rises from the massive crowd of onlookers. Slowly inching forward, the rest of the eager townsfolk politely ask if they can also try petting the giant wolf. Takumi stares in absolute shock as he realizes his fearsome, legendary pet has instantly become a beloved local tourist attraction. Praising Leo for being a real trooper, Takumi notes how long it took for the massive crowd to finally disperse. 2 hours later, Claire proudly presents the finest general store in Raktos as Takumi mentally groans about the exhausting delay. Gazing up at the massive storefront, Takumi marvels at the impressive scale of the town's largest establishment. Pushing open the heavy wooden doors, the group steps into the brightly lit and well-stocked shop. The store owner enthusiastically welcomes Lady Claire and eagerly asks how he can serve her today. Claire warmly greets Hein and introduces her companion as they prepare to browse his extensive wares. Bowing respectfully, Hein introduces himself as the humble shop owner while Takumi politely returns the greeting. Gesturing deeper into the store, Hein eagerly invites the group to follow him and see what catches their eye. The group admires the vast array of intricately crafted items neatly displayed along the expansive wooden shelves. Takumi scans the extensive collection of unfamiliar magical tools, weapons, and everyday goods scattered throughout the store. Turning down another bustling aisle, he observes that the sprawling shop seemingly sells just about everything imaginable. Stopping abruptly, something peculiar on a nearby shelf suddenly catches his full attention. Staring intently at a row of pocket watches, he realizes with utter confusion that they completely lack minute and second hands. Turning away from the bizarre display, he immediately calls out to Claire to ask a clarifying question. After consulting with her, Takumi discovers that the very concepts of seconds and minutes are entirely alien to this fantasy world. He internally realizes that the clocks here cycle twice over 28 hours, completely overturning his fundamental understanding of time. As Hein asks if something piqued his interest, Takumi silently wonders if this planet's rotation simply dictates a fundamentally different hour length. Shaking off his complex existential thoughts, he offers a polite smile to the highly attentive shopkeeper. Pointing directly at the strange timepieces, he confirms his intent to purchase a clock. Claire happily tells Hein they will take both a pocket watch and a table clock for their honored guest. When asked if that is all, Takumi decides to look around just a bit longer to find any other absolute essentials. Sebastian suddenly appears beside him, curiously asking if the young man has found anything else he likes. Pointing to a display of beautiful accessories, Takumi admits he thought they would make perfect gifts for Claire and Tellura. Clapping his hands together in sheer delight, Sebastian praises the wonderful idea while Takumi laments his complete lack of personal funds. Rubbing his chin in deep disappointment, Takumi sighs and decides he must unfortunately hold off on buying the presents. Sebastian immediately stops him, explaining that he can simply use the massive reward money he earned for saving Milady. Stunned by this sudden revelation, Takumi listens as the butler clarifies that they originally planned to use those exact funds for his purchases anyway. Staring at the shiny accessories, Takumi feels it is somewhat wrong to accept the reward since Leo did all the actual rescuing. Despite his immense gratitude, he silently vows to pay the noble family back someday for all their incredible generosity. Concluding their lengthy shopping trip, the owner graciously thanks them for their patronage as they step back outside. Boarding their carriage once more, the group settles in for the long and bumpy journey back to the estate. Claire notes they spent quite a while in town due to Leo's immense popularity, guessing they will arrive home just by sundown. Suddenly freezing in absolute panic, Takumi recalls a crucial detail they completely forgot to handle. He awkwardly points out that their primary reason for visiting town was actually to magically analyze his mysterious gift. Blushing in deep embarrassment at her oversight, Claire suggests they can still visit the establishment despite the rather late hour. Gulping down his lingering nervousness, Takumi firmly agrees to go and finally uncover the true nature of his magical abilities. Navigating the bustling town, the group finally arrives at their enigmatic destination. Takumi notes that the grey building, adorned with a black plaque and a white pentagram, gives him the creeps after their walk down the alley. Pushing open the creaky door, they are immediately greeted by a voice scolding them for keeping an old lady waiting. Stepping inside, Claire warmly greets the elderly woman named Isabel. Apologizing for the delay caused by an earlier incident, Claire exchanges pleasantries with Isabel, who decides to let their tardiness slide. Shifting her focus, the old woman glances sharply at the group to assess their new companion. Gazing directly at Takumi, Isabel correctly assumes he is the young man who requires a thorough mana analysis. Recalling Claire's earlier explanation, Takumi realizes that examining his mana capacity is the key to accurately analyzing his mysterious gift. Stepping forward respectfully, he introduces himself to Isabel and politely tells her it is nice to meet her. Smiling slightly, Isabel returns the pleasantries and prepares to begin the magical evaluation. Instructing him not to be shy, she tells Takumi to set his belongings down and place his hand directly on the crystal ball. Following her strict directions, he nervously rests his palm on the smooth surface of the magical sphere. Almost immediately, the dark crystal ball begins to violently flicker with a brilliant, pulsing light. The glowing orb pulses steadily, illuminating the dimly lit room with its intense magical energy. Leaning in closely, Isabel hums thoughtfully as she expertly reads the magical fluctuations emanating from the sphere. Analyzing his innate potential, she confirms he possesses an ample quantity of mana and could become a skilled magic practitioner with rigorous training. Suddenly widening her eyes in realization, Isabel correctly identifies that the young man is indeed a rare gift holder. Revealing the exact nature of his ability, she announces that his unique gift is called herb cultivation, granting him the power to grow weeds and herbs. Intrigued by this specific magical classification, Claire eagerly asks how exactly this unique power functions in practice. Isabel explains that Takumi has the extraordinary power to grow practically any type of plant that is not classified as a standard crop. Seeking further clarification, Claire asks if his ability naturally extends to medicinal herbs since it strictly excludes traditional agriculture. Confirming her logical suspicion, Isabel notes that he can successfully cultivate such herbs provided they are grown within their natural habitat. Gasping in sudden realization, Claire connects this magical revelation directly to the elusive capwort they found in the forest. She excitedly explains that despite their exhaustive search, Takumi miraculously found the rare herb the exact moment he started looking at the ground. Nodding knowingly, Isabel asks if Claire suspects his newly discovered gift actively played a role in that miraculous forest discovery. Recalling the intense encounter, Takumi realizes he completely forgot to mention one crucial detail about that specific day to his host. He confesses that the medicinal herb actually sprang right out of the earth between his fingers the moment he simply started imagining what a capwort looked like. Absorbing this critical piece of information, Isabel realizes exactly how the miraculous events unfolded in the woods. She confirms that his detailed recount is perfectly consistent with her magical analysis, praising his remarkably fine and unique gift. Suddenly remembering another strange phenomenon, Claire eagerly brings up how Takumi managed to instantly dry the capwort right after picking it. Elaborating on the ability's immense depth, Isabel explains that altering a plant's physical state to suit his immediate needs is also a core function of his gift. Connecting the dots, Takumi recalls wishing the plant would dry out sooner, prompting Sebastian to confidently declare that there is no longer any room for doubt. Staring down at his hands in pure disbelief, Takumi silently processes the absolute truth of his bizarre, plant-altering powers. He internally debates whether the ability to instantly grow and prepare non-vegetable plants is amazingly convenient or just incredibly niche and bland. Bowing deeply, Takumi profoundly thanks Isabel for her immense help, though she humbly brushes off the praise by claiming she merely examined his mana. Shifting to a highly serious tone, the wise old woman asks if she may impart some important advice to the young man. Reminding him that a gift is something truly special, she urges him to think carefully about how he uses it since its ultimate potential rests entirely in his hands. Taking her wise words completely to heart, Takumi solemnly promises to carefully consider how he will utilize his herb cultivation going forward. Later that evening, the traveling group finally arrives back at the towering gates of Claire's grand estate. Pushing open the heavy doors, the estate staff warmly welcomes Lady Claire and Mr. Takumi safely back home. Stepping forward with pristine elegance, the head maid politely calls out to her returning mistress. Claire acknowledges the greeting as the maid formally announces that their dinner is completely ready to be served. Acknowledging a joyful bark from Leo, Claire instructs Takumi to drop off his belongings in his room before joining them all for the grand feast. Letting out a heavy sigh of relief, Takumi finally relaxes on his soft bed. He reflects on how utterly draining it feels to survive a long day packed with unexpected events in this brand new world. Patting the mattress, he calls his giant companion Leo over to join him. The massive wolf happily jumps up onto the bed to snuggle closely with her beloved master. Petting her soft fur, Takumi praises the gentle beast for staying completely calm when the excited townsfolk patted her. He enthusiastically rubs her massive head while thanking her for bravely stopping the dangerous thugs from harming them. Wrapping his arms tightly around the giant wolf, he declares himself absolutely ready to face whatever challenges this new world throws at him. The bedroom door suddenly clicks open as the maid Layla politely announces that Milady is waiting for him in the dining room. Freezing in immense embarrassment while awkwardly hugging his giant dog, Takumi quickly apologizes to the completely unfazed maid. The lively clinking of silverware echoes through the grand dining hall as the group enjoys their evening feast. Everyone happily savors the exquisite dishes meticulously prepared by the estate's highly skilled culinary staff. Showing off his completely clean plate, Takumi enthusiastically praises the incredibly delicious meal. Claire notes that the head chef Helena must be delighted, prompting the proud cook to graciously accept the high praise. Sitting on the floor nearby, the massive Silver Fenrir happily chows down on her own generous portion of dinner. With their bellies completely full, the group relaxes comfortably around the table with cups of freshly brewed tea. Gazing across the table, Takumi quietly gathers his scattered thoughts to initiate a serious conversation. He gently calls out Claire's name to politely grab her full attention. Reminding her that he openly shared his own origins yesterday, he kindly asks if she would be willing to tell him more about herself. The young noblewoman stares back with an utterly blank and deeply confused expression. Suddenly blushing furiously, she stammers in sheer panic as she questions what exactly he wishes to know about her. Startled by her wildly flustered reaction, Takumi hesitates as he frantically tries to clarify his highly innocent question. He calmly explains that he simply wants to understand why she runs this massive villa and why the local townsfolk treat her with such intense reverence. Breathing a heavy sigh of absolute relief, Claire regains her pristine composure and agrees that it is only fair to share her story. Preparing to explain her unique living situation, she begins by addressing exactly why she and Talura actively reside in this isolated estate. She bluntly reveals that they moved out of the main house specifically to physically separate themselves from their overbearing father. Admitting her father is highly affectionate, she laments how he constantly spiraled every single conversation into aggressively pushing potential suitors on her. Takumi visibly recoils in sheer surprise at the sudden, stressful mention of relentless arranged marriages. Elaborating on her sheer exasperation, Claire recalls a disastrous day where she was utterly forced to reject 5 different men back-to-back. Her mounting frustration finally boils over as she furiously reveals that her father even started pushing creepy suitors onto 10-year-old Talura. Unable to tolerate the relentless, suffocating madness any longer, the sisters made the drastic decision to completely flee the main house. Nodding in deep sympathy, Takumi completely understands how emotionally draining that daily ordeal must have been for the young noblewoman. Slamming her hands firmly on the table, Claire passionately agrees and completely launches into a furious rant about her father's absurd antics. The deeply frustrated noblewoman ends up aggressively venting about her eccentric father for an entire half-hour. Finally catching her breath, she clears her throat and formally apologizes to her guest for the highly unbecoming outburst. Regaining her pristine elegance, she smoothly pivots the conversation to address Takumi's curiosity regarding the highly respectful townsfolk. Takumi recalls how the local town guards immediately recognized her absolute authority without a single shred of hesitation. She proudly explains that the royal kingdom officially recognizes the esteemed Libet family as a highly prestigious line of dukes. She elaborates that her father actively governs the entire surrounding territory, heavily including the bustling trade town of Raktos. Stunned by the immense political weight of that grand title, Takumi quietly repeats the word in absolute awe. Confirming his silent realization, Claire accurately outlines the strict nobility hierarchy, firmly establishing that her family's rank sits directly beneath royalty. Shocked by the revelation, Takumi realizes that Claire's noble lineage is second only to the royal family itself. Frantically pushing his chair back, he profusely apologizes for acting so casually around someone of such immense status. Waving off his sudden formality, Claire warmly insists that he continue speaking to her just as he always has. Leaning in closer, she encourages him to treat her with the exact same relaxed familiarity he shows her younger sister. Still reeling from the political weight of her title, Takumi nervously questions if such a casual dynamic is genuinely acceptable. Stepping in smoothly, Sebastian confirms that he sees absolutely no reason to object since Milady actively insists on it. Sebastian completely shatters Takumi's worldview by pointing out that commanding a Silver Fenrir actually places his social standing above even a duke. Reminding him of their first meeting, Claire notes that the legendary Silver Fenrir is prominently featured right on the official royal crest. Pulling out a small object, she explains that the Libet family also possesses a highly distinctive crest depicting the fearsome beast. Examining the intricate design, Takumi agrees that the fierce imagery is undeniably striking. She details how the royal crest represents absolute indomitability, while her family's aggressive emblem actively symbolizes their terrifying power to crush any opposition. Delving into history, she reveals that a Silver Fenrir once helped her ancestors triumph in war, earning their bloodline its prestigious noble status. Processing the heavy lore, Takumi marvels at the legendary beast's active participation in ancient, bloody conflicts. Claire concludes that her family has deeply honored the magnificent creatures for countless generations due to this massive historical debt. Looking at his oversized and dopey pet, Takumi struggles immensely to connect her with the terrifying beasts of legend. Nodding at his realization, Claire states that it should now be entirely obvious why everyone in the kingdom immediately recognizes his giant companion. Stepping up quietly beside him, Sebastian suddenly requests a brief moment of Takumi's time. The loyal butler leans in close to discreetly whisper something important into the young man's ear. Nudging him strategically, Sebastian softly reminds him about a specific secret preparation they discussed earlier in town. A jolt of sudden realization strikes Takumi as he remembers the surprise gifts he purchased. Turning back to the table, he gently calls out both sisters' names to grab their full attention. He carefully places two beautifully wrapped presents on the table, instantly sparking their intense curiosity. Flustered and mumbling his words, he clumsily tries to explain that the gifts are a small token of his immense appreciation for all their help. Taking a deep breath to steady himself, he finally manages to clearly state that the presents are his heartfelt way of saying thank you. Bowing slightly, he formally asks the stunned noblewomen to accept his humble offerings. Eagerly tearing into the wrapping, Tellura excitedly opens her small box first. Her eyes sparkle with pure joy as she reveals a beautiful accessory shaped exactly like her favorite giant wolf. Handing the second box to Claire, Takumi bashfully admits he will try to be more casual with her and sincerely hopes she enjoys the gift. Opening her package, Claire gasps softly as she admires the incredibly delicate and pretty hairpin nestled inside. Smiling warmly at him, she expresses her deep gratitude and notes that she eagerly awaits the day he finally feels completely at ease around her. Thrilled by the wonderful present, Claire immediately calls her maid over to help her put the hairpin on. Turning her head to show off the elegant new accessory, she shyly asks Takumi for his honest opinion. Takumi bluntly compliments that the lovely hairpin makes her look even more beautiful, instantly causing the young noblewoman to blush furiously. Watching the flustered couple from the sidelines, Sebastian chuckles fondly about the joys of youth while Leo barks in happy agreement. Flipping through a massive book, Takumi absorbs a wealth of information on various medicinal plants. Deciding to test his abilities, he finds a specific entry that completely catches his eye. A brief flashback reveals the conversation that took place 30 minutes prior. Takumi approaches Claire and politely asks if he can use the estate's garden for a little while. Smiling warmly, she assumes he simply wants to spend the day playing with Leo again. Correcting her gently, Takumi explains he actually intends to test out the limits of his newly discovered gift. Startled by the sudden shift in topic, Claire echoes his words as she processes his magical request. He elaborates that he wants to discover exactly what types of useful herbs his herb cultivation can produce. Understanding his goal, Claire gladly grants him full permission to use the space. Turning his attention away from his host, Takumi suddenly calls out to the nearby butler. He asks Sebastian if the massive villa happens to possess any reference books detailing medicinal herbs. Back in the present, Takumi reads about the low plant, noting its thick, jagged leaves and healing jelly. He marvels at his convenient ability to perfectly comprehend the foreign texts despite them not being written in Japanese. Connecting the physical description to his own world, he heavily suspects this mysterious low is actually just aloe vera. Noting the tough leaves and jelly-like fluid, he finds the plant much easier to visualize by likening it to the familiar flora from back home. Closing the heavy book, Takumi prepares himself to initiate the magical experiment. He crouches down in the dirt, bringing his bare hands close to the garden soil. Stealing his focus, he stretches his palms out directly over the empty patch of earth. Closing his eyes, he intensely visualizes the exact physical structure of the low plant. With his mental image perfectly set, he actively invokes his herb cultivation ability. A sudden, violent rustling erupts from the ground directly beneath his glowing hands. Takumi gasps in sheer awe as a vibrant green sprout instantly bursts upward from the previously barren soil. The magical plant rapidly expands, shooting thick, jagged leaves outward in mere seconds. Multiple fleshy fronds completely form before his eyes as the rapid growth cycle successfully concludes. Staring at the fully grown succulent, Takumi realizes he actually succeeded on his very first attempt. Claire and Tellura rush over in absolute amazement, though Sebastian stares in utter disbelief that he deliberately chose to grow a low. Stepping forward, the bewildered butler seriously asks Takumi if he truly comprehends what he just cultivated. Takumi casually admits he just read about it in the book and remembered a nearly identical plant from his home world. Sebastian closes his eyes, deeply absorbing the absurdly casual nature of this miraculous feat. Educating the oblivious young man, Sebastian explains that Lo is a powerful medicinal plant where just a touch of its jelly can heal injuries. The butler emphasizes that the jelly heals wounds in an absolute instant, completely shocking Takumi. He elaborates that while it cannot cure mortal wounds, it easily seals bone-deep gashes without leaving a single scar. Sweating nervously, Takumi realizes this incredibly potent magical flora is absolutely nothing like regular aloe vera. Sebastian notes that because their native regions are unknown and they never grow in clusters, low plants are exceedingly rare and highly priced. Overwhelmed by the immense gravity of his creation, Takumi weakly nods in understanding. Sebastian admits the household would have been grateful for any basic herbs, but this miraculous result completely shattered all their expectations. Intensely curious about its sheer market value, Takumi nervously asks how much a single low is actually worth. Noting the plant's 10+ leaves, Sebastian casually states that selling it could easily buy an entire house, sending Takumi into absolute shock. Trembling at the massive economic implications, Takumi stammers out a question about potentially opening a store to sell his magical harvests. Sebastian confidently assures him that with a gift capable of instantly growing such immensely valuable plants, he could establish a wildly successful store in no time at all. Takumi declares he wants to find a way to make income because he absolutely hates freeloading, prompting Claire to ask if he wishes to open a medicinal herb store. Sebastian swiftly cautions that growing exclusively lows would be unwise because oversupply would violently crash their market value. Offering a temporary solution, Claire suggests keeping the rare low safely at her villa, which Takumi gladly accepts since he intended to give it to her anyway. Stepping up to support his future endeavors, Claire generously offers to assist him if he decides to become a commercial medicinal plant merchant. She proposes letting the highly connected Libet family handle all the complex logistics of his business. Seeking clarification, Takumi asks if delegating the logistics means the Duke's people will actively sell and market his harvested goods. Confirming his exact thoughts, Claire explains that the Libet family expertly runs all manner of domestic and foreign businesses. She reveals that the taxes collected from their lands barely cover the basic duchy upkeep and emergency military mobilizations. Fortunately, generations of excellent commercial leaders have allowed her family to comfortably maintain their massive wealth strictly through trade profits. Delegating merchandising to the Libet family guarantees that potential customers will never doubt the quality or authenticity of the affiliated goods. Assuring him of fair compensation, Claire adds that she won't stop him if he prefers the allure and control of managing his own independent store. Brushing off the independent route entirely, Takumi admits he never dreamed of running his own business and would much rather avoid it. Admitting his terrible business sense, he officially defers all commercial responsibilities to her highly experienced family. Claire happily accepts the arrangement but warns that their current discussion remains strictly an informal agreement. Realizing she must formally pitch the idea to her father for official permission, she notes that he would likely never reject such a profitable venture. Sighing heavily at the incoming headache, she dreads that contacting her father will inevitably trigger another exhausting discussion about potential arranged marriages. Pumping her fists with renewed determination, Claire resolves to finalize their contract while devising a clever way to smoothly deflect her father's absurd demands. Later that afternoon, Takumi aggressively tests his herb cultivation, slowly transforming the villa's garden into a lush field of experimental plants. Staring at an unknown leaf he just grew, he realizes he broke his own rule, having successfully cultivated a plant that wasn't even listed in his borrowed book. Watching Talura and Leo run around earlier sparked thoughts of exhaustion, miraculously allowing him to spontaneously imagine and grow a fatigue-relieving plant. Pushing the magical mystery aside because it is almost lunchtime, Takumi carefully sets the strange leaf down to analyze later. Everyone gathers around the grand dining table, happily devouring a massive and delicious feast together. Finishing his heavy meal, Takumi turns to Leo and sternly announces that the giant beast is immediately due for a bath. The giant wolf aggressively wipes her sore-stained mouth on the floor while Takumi furiously yells at her to stop ruining the rug. Thanking Claire for the food, Takumi formally excuses himself to handle Leo's dire cleaning needs while the massive beast whines loudly in protest. Dragging the whimpering, depressed wolf down the hall, Takumi ruthlessly declares they will be taking regular baths from now on to keep her squeaky clean. Standing before the giant washroom tub, he strictly warns the massive beast to brace herself for the incoming water. A massive bucket of water violently splashes against Leo's thick silver coat, prompting a startled yelp from the legendary creature. Recoiling from the sudden blast, the giant wolf whines miserably as the heavy water thoroughly drenches her fur. Showing absolutely no mercy, Takumi ruthlessly hurls bucket after bucket over the whining creature until she is completely soaked. Scrubbing hard into her saturated coat, he remarks on just how incredibly grimy the giant beast has actually become. He acknowledges the heavy filth makes sense, considering she spent countless days running wildly through the forest without a single chance to wash. Moving diligently forward with the exhausting cleaning process, he cheerfully announces that it is finally time to wash her face. Vigorously scrubbing her snout, he gently scolds her for letting messy meat stains completely ruin her majestic good looks. The spotless wolf aggressively shakes her heavy body dry, earning high praise from Takumi for toughing out the dreadful bath. Stepping out of the washroom, Takumi politely asks the maid Layla to finish wiping Leo's body dry, to which she happily agrees. Slipping away to handle his own personal hygiene, Takumi steps cleanly into the massive, steaming tub. Submerging himself entirely in the hot water, he lets out a deep and immensely satisfied sigh. Closing his eyes, he fully savors the unparalleled physical rejuvenation that only a warm, luxurious bath can provide. Stretching his limbs out comfortably in the hot water, he happily praises the sheer brilliance of oversized bathtubs. Relaxing after the exhausting wash, Takumi reflects that bathing his massive companion takes far more effort now but is still incredibly fun. Stepping out of the washroom, Takumi politely thanks his hosts for allowing them to use the luxurious bath. Claire warmly greets the young man, praising him for doing a wonderful job since the giant wolf looks absolutely immaculate. Takumi proudly admits he meticulously scrubbed her to achieve this exact result, while Talura happily buries her face into the wolf's incredibly fluffy fur. Squeezing the giant beast tightly, the young girl enthusiastically declares her absolute love for how amazing the soft fur feels. Observing the pristine creature, Sebastian notes that the majestic luster of her silver coat shines even more brilliantly now. Gazing at the magnificent wolf, Claire admits that her regal appearance makes it perfectly understandable why Silver Fenrirs are legendary for obeying absolutely no one. Smiling fondly at his massive pet, Takumi warmly agrees that Leo possesses an incredibly beautiful coat. Smoothly shifting the topic, Claire gently asks Takumi if he clearly remembers the specific forest where they first crossed paths. Takumi recalls it as the woods containing the Capwort, prompting Claire to reveal that her family's legendary first patriarch once traveled through that exact wilderness. Connecting the legend of the patriarch befriending a Silver Fenrir, Takumi listens closely as Claire intensely grips his hands and requests that he and Leo accompany her into the treacherous depths of that forest. Claire gazes intensely into Takumi's eyes, holding his hands firmly in a quiet, tense moment. Breaking the heavy silence, she calls out his name with utmost seriousness. She boldly asks if he and the giant wolf would be willing to escort her deep into the uncharted forest, leaving him completely stunned. The shocking request catches both the confused beast and her absolutely bewildered servants entirely off guard. Claire explains that according to legend, the very first patriarch of her noble family met his Silver Fenrir inside those exact woods. Takumi stares back in surprise, slowly processing the historical weight of the dangerous location. Highly intrigued, he asks exactly how her ancestor ever managed to successfully befriend such a legendary creature. Shaking her head, Claire admits that the exact details of their miraculous bond remain an absolute mystery to her as well. She reveals that no surviving historical documents or family legends contain a detailed account of that specific event. Pausing thoughtfully, she notes that there is one crucial surviving piece of information. Ancient records describe her ancestor being completely surrounded by lesser Fenrirs right before the legendary Silver Fenrir suddenly appeared to intervene. Because of that monumental, fateful encounter, the treacherous wilderness officially became known as Fenrir Forest. Realizing the distinction, Takumi asks if standard Fenrirs are fundamentally different from their silver counterparts. Claire confirms that regular Fenrirs are significantly smaller and slower than the majestic beast currently sitting beside them. She sternly warns that despite being physically weaker, a regular Fenrir's terrifying ability to wield fire and ice magic still makes them incredibly lethal to normal humans. When Takumi asks if deadly packs still roam the area, Claire admits that absolutely no one has spotted a single Fenrir since her ancestor's death. The young man mentally connects the ominous name to his own impossible arrival in that exact same territory. He realizes the absurd coincidence of manifesting in that specific forest while his tiny dog simultaneously transformed into a legendary beast linked to Claire's bloodline. Staring at the young noblewoman, he internally remarks that the incredibly convenient timing feels exactly like the deliberate will of fate. Breaking his train of thought, Claire smoothly continues her dangerous proposition. She explains that the terrifying family legend naturally caused everyone to fear the forest, leaving its deepest, darkest depths entirely unexplored. Connecting the dots, Takumi concludes that delving deeper into the uncharted woods might actually reveal surviving packs of legendary beasts. Just as Claire enthusiastically confirms his theory, a panicked voice suddenly shouts out her title. The fiercely loyal Sebastian steps forward, fiercely demanding to speak his mind despite the massive breach in protocol. He passionately scolds his mistress, declaring that venturing into such a deadly domain is absolute madness even with a Silver Fenrir protecting them. The rest of the frantic staff aggressively chimes in to support the butler, screaming that no one could possibly survive a den of magical wolves. Desperately bowing their heads, the terrified servants beg the young noblewoman to completely reconsider this suicidal expedition. Surrounded by her relentlessly begging staff, Claire tightly grips her fists in mounting frustration. Snapping completely, she fiercely orders the room to be silent and furiously reminds them she was only asking for Takumi's input. As Sebastian humbly apologizes for the interruption, Claire immediately turns her intense gaze back to the bewildered young man to demand his answer. Cornered by her overwhelming intensity, Takumi stares blankly as he struggles to formulate a proper response. Sweating nervously, he internally realizes that she absolutely will not accept a flat refusal to her dangerous request. Desperately buying some time, he asks if he can consult his giant companion first, which Claire happily permits. Turning away from the intense noblewoman, he quietly calls out to his massive, furry protector. Kneeling down beside the giant beast, he prepares to relay the suicidal mission details. He gently explains Claire's desire to return to their terrifying spawn point and asks for the wolf's honest opinion. Reading her nonchalant body language, he perfectly translates her casual demeanor as an absolute lack of concern. Hoping to instill some basic survival instincts, he explicitly warns her about the very real threat of hostile magical packs attacking them. Interpreting her arrogant huff as dismissing regular Fenrirs as weaklings, he presses further by asking what happens if they encounter her equally matched silver kin. Leo proudly puffs out her chest, projecting utter confidence that her wild kin will actively welcome them as friends instead of attacking. Takumi marvels as Leo confidently barks that regular Fenrirs stand absolutely no chance against her. Pushing the scenario, Takumi asks what she would do against a massive pack or other monsters. Leo boasts that other monsters are even weaker and she could easily obliterate multiple packs. A sudden realization strikes Takumi, wondering exactly how Leo is so knowledgeable about mythical Fenrirs. Gripping his hair, he internally questions how he is even capable of translating her barks. A long, heavy silence stretches between the bewildered man and his innocent-looking giant dog. Dropping the mystery, Takumi asks if she is okay with accompanying Claire to the forest. Turning back to Claire, Takumi confidently announces they have decided to gladly join her expedition. The sudden acceptance sends absolute shockwaves through the room, completely stunning the loyal servants. Noticing their horrified expressions, Takumi gently calls out to Sebastian, Layla, and Gerda. Addressing their fears, he astutely guesses they are terrified Claire will actually find the beasts. Lowering his head in solemn agreement, the dutiful butler admits Takumi's sharp deduction is correct. Claire looks at her loyal servant with deep affection as he confesses his desperate protective desires. Hoping to ease their anxieties, Takumi promises the forest is perfectly safe with Leo protecting them. Staring intently at the young man, Sebastian desperately asks if he is absolutely certain. Processing the reasoning, the butler demands a moment to realize Takumi relies on dog advice. Staring in bewilderment, Sebastian asks if Takumi is genuinely implying he understands the beast. Sweating nervously, Takumi backpedals, explaining their long history allows him to interpret her body language. Stepping in smoothly, Claire points out that the massive beast just nodded in complete agreement. Defeated by the absurd logic, Sebastian simply stares forward in utter, stunned silence. Seizing the opportunity, the giant Silver Fenrir unleashes a complex string of enthusiastic, guttural barks. Translating confidently, Takumi explains regular Fenrirs instinctively submit to silver superiors and pose no threat. Flashing a victorious smile, Takumi asks the sweating butler if that tactical breakdown was persuasive. Seizing victory, Claire excitedly declares the Fenrir forest expedition is officially set despite Sebastian's reluctance. Wasting no time, Claire announces she will aggressively organize all their travel preparations tomorrow. Leaning forward, Takumi carefully asks why Claire is so intensely obsessed with finding Silver Fenrirs. A shadow crosses Claire's features as she abruptly brushes off the highly personal question. Gesturing toward her dozing sister, Claire politely deflects the heavy conversation for another time. Before retreating, the young noblewoman leans in incredibly close to her honored guest. Whispering discreetly, Claire promises to reveal her true motivations solely to him and Leo. Understanding the immense weight of her secret trust, Takumi offers a short, sincere nod. Later that night, Takumi finally retreats to the quiet sanctuary of his lavish guest bedroom. Collapsing onto the mattress, he mutters his absolute disbelief over returning to that deadly forest. Haunting memories of being violently hunted completely flood his anxious, stressed mind. His fearful thoughts are abruptly interrupted when Leo begins aggressively sniffing the wooden floor. Following his pet's gaze, Takumi quickly recognizes the mysterious leaf he magically cultivated earlier. Recalling his botanical experiment, he remembers leaving the unknown plant there to research later. To his absolute horror, the massive beast suddenly opens her giant, drooling jaws incredibly wide. Lunging forward with lightning speed, the legendary beast ruthlessly chomps down on the magical leaf. Completely ignoring her master's despair, the giant wolf happily crunches on her unauthorized midnight snack. Takumi violently panics and screams at the giant beast for eating the potentially poisonous magical herb. Ignoring his absolute terror, the massive wolf happily tackles her master with a playful bark. Pinned to the floor, Takumi desperately asks the energetic beast what is wrong with her. He stares in utter disbelief as the giant wolf literally glows with boundless magical energy. Stunned by her glowing aura, he cautiously asks how she feels after eating the mysterious leaf. Translating her happy barks, he realizes the miraculous plant completely erased her exhaustion and boosted her strength. Shocked by the results, Takumi realizes he accidentally cultivated an insanely powerful magical buffing item. The energized beast continues to happily bounce around the spacious guest bedroom without any signs of stopping. Rubbing his incredibly heavy eyes, an exhausted Takumi desperately begs his hyperactive pet to finally go to sleep. Defeated by her boundless energy, he agrees to play a little longer before their upcoming expedition. Apologizing for the delay, Claire asks Takumi if they are finally ready to head to the forest. Sebastian steps up with a serious expression, fully prepared to join their dangerous expedition. Surprised by the large escort, Takumi questions Sebastian, who firmly insists that numbers provide safety. Annoyed by the heavy security, Claire threatens to stop listening to her overprotective butler entirely. Gently calming her down, Takumi assures Claire that Sebastian only has her best interests at heart. The remaining estate staff waves goodbye, urging the heavily armed group to return safely. With everyone safely inside, the heavy carriage door shuts firmly to begin their journey. Sitting inside the cramped carriage, Layla awkwardly bumps into Takumi and hesitantly calls his name. Blushing slightly, she timidly asks the young man if he could make some room for her. Leaning in incredibly close, Layla snuggles tightly against Takumi and softly claims it is for comfort. Watching the awkward romance unfold, Sebastian chuckles loudly and warmly praises the joys of youth. Flustered by the intimate display, a blushing Claire desperately begs her butler to be quiet. Ignoring her embarrassment, Sebastian dramatically commands the driver to officially begin their long journey. The wooden carriage rattles loudly as the sturdy horses pull them steadily down the dirt path. Wondering about the travel time, Takumi learns the bumpy ride will take roughly 3 hours. Takumi admits his anxiety stems entirely from never riding in a horse-drawn carriage for this long. Intrigued by this cultural difference, Sebastian curiously asks about the main transportation in Takumi's world. Struggling to explain cars, Takumi simply describes them as giant metal crates that move independently. Claire and Sebastian gasp in absolute shock at the concept of vehicles moving without horses. Utterly baffled, Claire frantically points out that Takumi previously claimed his world possessed absolutely no magic. Smiling at their sheer confusion, Takumi prepares to explain the basic mechanics of modern human engineering. He calmly explains that his world utilizes highly combustible liquid fuel to successfully power their vehicles. He details how burning this unique fuel generates enough raw energy to propel the heavy metal. Completely amazed by the scientific explanation, Sebastian loudly praises the marvelous craftsmanship of Takumi's world. Takumi notes that lacking magic forced his people to get incredibly creative with their technological advancements. Quoting an old book, Takumi concludes that sufficiently advanced technology is fundamentally indistinguishable from actual magic. Halting the carriage near the dense tree line, Sebastian announces they must proceed on foot from here. The group stares intensely at the dark, foreboding depths of the notoriously dangerous Fenrir forest. Stepping off the carriage, Takumi warmly praises his giant companion for not being tired at all. One of the heavily armed escorts quickly ties the carriage horses securely to a nearby tree. The loyal guard promises to diligently watch over the vulnerable animals until the group safely returns. Preparing for their long trek, Sebastian politely asks Takumi to help the guards gather wooden branches. Noting the high midday sun, the butler declares that a proper outdoor lunch is now in order. Readily accepting the simple chore, Takumi asks his massive furry companion to help him forage for wood. The giant wolf enthusiastically dashes into the thick brush to hunt for perfectly sized fallen branches. Returning with a large pile of kindling, Takumi asks the busy guards if they gathered enough. A nearby guard completely loses his mind at the impossible sight of Leo preparing to cast magic. Opening her massive jaws, the legendary beast focuses her intense magical energy directly at the woodpile. A low, terrifying growl vibrates from her throat as the explosive magical energy rapidly builds up. With a thunderous roar, Leo unleashes a massive blast of fire to instantly ignite their campsite. Takumi gasps in sheer awe as a massive fire pillar erupts. Sebastian marvels at how legendary Silver Fenrirs cast their intense magic. The brilliant magical flames dance wildly, perfectly illuminating the dense forest. Sebastian thanks the giant wolf and prepares their outdoor lunch. As Leo eagerly approaches, Sebastian politely asks the beast to wait. The group happily digs into the freshly prepared campsite meal. Takumi warmly praises Layla for the food while Leo barks approvingly. Sebastian announces they will continue their journey once the camp is tidied. Suddenly, Sebastian approaches Claire and Takumi with a highly serious expression. The loyal butler firmly presents them with sheathed protective weapons. Staring at the offered sword, Takumi nervously admits his total inexperience. Sebastian explains it is purely precautionary against unknown treacherous forest threats. Understanding the grim necessity, Takumi gratefully accepts the heavy protective sword. Nearby, Leo suddenly raises her massive head and aggressively sniffs the air. Sebastian commands everyone to press forward until they locate the nearby river. The heavily armed group marches cautiously into the dark, foreboding woods. Takumi confirms with Sebastian that the river serves as their designated checkpoint. Noticing Leo's enthusiastic barks, Takumi points out her incredibly good mood. The dense foliage thickens around them as they venture deeper inside. Sunlight barely pierces the heavy canopy, casting eerie shadows across their path. Hearing running water, a guard announces they are finally approaching the river. Claire pants heavily, clearly struggling to maintain the grueling physical pace. Sebastian promises a break soon, and Claire wheezes she can barely manage. Suddenly, Leo's ears perk up sharply, causing Takumi to quickly turn. A deep, terrifying growl vibrates from the wolf, instantly alarming Takumi. Leo unleashes frantic warning barks, causing Takumi to gasp in sudden realization. Takumi screams for Sebastian to halt, frantically warning about an incoming orc. Catching her breath, a horrified Claire repeats the word in sheer panic. Snapping into action, Sebastian commands Philip to immediately draw his weapon. Ordering Johanna and Nicola into formation, the veteran guards swiftly draw blades. Fierce guards vow that no orc will ever harm their precious milady on their watch. Realizing the immediate danger, Takumi quickly brandishes his newly acquired sword for self-defense. Gripping the hilt tightly, he slowly draws the heavy blade from its sturdy sheath. Heavy, ominous footsteps crash violently through the dense forest underbrush. A massive, shadowy figure suddenly emerges from the thick foliage ahead. Takumi gasps in sheer terror upon realizing 3 towering orcs have suddenly ambushed them. The monstrous beasts stomp aggressively forward, unleashing deafening and blood-curdling roars. Suddenly, a massive blur shoots directly past the terrified humans. Startled by the sudden movement, the roaring orcs recoil as Leo lunges fiercely toward them. The giant wolf effortlessly smashes into the towering monsters with absolutely devastating physical force. A brutal barrage of rapid strikes instantly crushes the entire orc raiding party. Takumi stares in absolute awe as the deadly battle concludes in the blink of an eye. Breathing a heavy sigh of relief, Takumi slowly lowers his drawn weapon. The majestic wolf turns back toward her master and lets out a soft, questioning bark. Sheathing his heavy blade, Takumi warmly asks his giant companion if she is completely uninjured. Leo happily inches closer, playfully nudging her relieved master with a joyful bark. Smiling fondly, Takumi praises his loyal pet for doing an incredibly good job. The journey into the treacherous forest finally begins as the group advances. Sobbing in shame, the guards lament acting like useless scarecrows during the terrifying battle. Sebastian internally marvels that Silver Fenrirs are vastly stronger than he ever imagined. Ignoring their absolute shock, Leo simply pants and barks happily at her master. Staring at the massive beast, a bewildered guard desperately asks what Leo just said. Sweating nervously, Takumi hesitates to translate the giant wolf's arrogant and terrifying statement. He awkwardly translates that Leo considers monstrous orcs to be nothing more than tasty delicacies. The seasoned warriors stand in stunned silence, knowing orcs are actually incredibly notable threats. Noticing the guards' total disbelief, Takumi hastily suggests they continue their trek toward the river. Turning to his companion, he politely asks Leo to carry the intact orc carcass. The massive wolf effortlessly lifts the heavy beast, proving she is truly dependable. Regaining their composure, the guards quickly volunteer to carry the remaining torn orc limbs. The heavily armored men struggle slightly as they gather the grotesque, bloody monster parts. Watching them strain, Takumi notes that hauling the heavy limbs looks incredibly difficult. Suddenly struck by a helpful idea, he immediately stops in his tracks. He urgently calls out, ordering the three struggling guards to wait just a second. Digging through his belongings, he triumphantly produces a handful of strange magical herbs. Acknowledging their weird appearance, he insists the men consume the bizarre plants anyway. He explains that eating the mysterious herbs will make carrying the heavy limbs significantly easier. Trusting his judgment, the exhausted guards nervously pop the strange leaves into their mouths. Despite the ghastly purple color, the men excitedly chatter about the delicious soft drink flavor. They suddenly marvel at how incredibly light their bodies and the massive orcs feel. Surging with boundless energy, the fully revitalized guards enthusiastically sprint down the forest path. Watching them go, Takumi admits this magical buff resulted from simple herb cultivation experimentation. Since the river awaits, he shelves the complicated explanation about his purely coincidental creation. Claire pouts adorably but demands he fully explain his magical methods once they have time. Breaking through the dense foliage, the rushing river finally comes into clear view. Turning back, Takumi gently encourages the exhausted Claire to push just a bit further. Panting heavily and wheezing, she desperately looks forward to finally taking a well-deserved break. The giant wolf barks excitedly as she spots the refreshing, cool water ahead. Leaping joyfully into the air, Leo creates a massive splash as she hits the river. The majestic beast happily floats around, completely soaking her thick silver fur in the stream. Takumi chuckles, noting that even a legendary Silver Fenrir relies on the classic doggy paddle. Breathing a heavy sigh of relief, Takumi steps firmly onto the solid riverbank. Completely drained of all energy, the delicate noblewoman struggles just to remain standing. Noticing her severe physical distress, Takumi quickly rushes over to her side. He gently calls out Claire's name to grab her fading attention. Offering his support, he informs her that the men successfully found a good campsite. Peering closely at her exhausted face, he asks if she is truly all right. Though severely fatigued, Claire proudly insists she is fine and can still walk. Takumi notices Claire pushing herself hard today. Sebastian officially declares that they will set up camp here for the day. He politely urges the exhausted young noblewoman to rest her weary feet nearby. The diligent guards immediately begin constructing the tents for their encampment. Sebastian announces he will prepare the slaughtered orcs, prompting Takumi to offer his help. Gratefully accepting the offer, the butler agrees they could use the extra assistance. Leo bounds over happily, ready to assist with the gruesome task. Sebastian warmly thanks the beast while Takumi wonders if Leo can actually butcher meat. Following the meal, Takumi asks Leo if she enjoyed the delicious dinner. The massive wolf lets out a satisfied howl in response to her master. Watching Claire rest, Takumi brings up the need to organize tonight's watch order. Sebastian agrees, noting that dangerous monsters could ambush them at any moment. Takumi sheepishly admits he forgot about guard duty since his world lacks monsters. The butler calmly suggests they finalize the night shifts right now. Sebastian assigns the shifts among the guards and himself without including Takumi. Surprised by his exclusion, Takumi objects while Sebastian cites his total lack of experience. Acknowledging his inexperience, Takumi firmly begs Sebastian to let him participate anyway. Leo suddenly nuzzles against him, offering her fluffy support. Gaining confidence, Takumi loudly declares he has Leo by his side to help. Swayed by such fierce enthusiasm, Sebastian finally relents and accepts his request. Reorganizing the schedule, Sebastian assigns the first watch directly to Takumi and Leo. Thrilled, Takumi accepts the 3-hour shift starting at 10 o'clock. Checking his pocket watch, Takumi calculates that his shift ends at 13 o'clock. A frail voice suddenly interrupts as Claire weakly volunteers for guard duty. Takumi turns around and stares in absolute shock at the exhausted noblewoman. Sebastian firmly orders her to sleep, pointing out her extreme fatigue from the journey. He sternly threatens to take her straight home if she remains tired by morning. Claire listens in silence, clearly conflicted by her physical limits and noble responsibilities. Takumi realizes she feels guilty resting while others work despite her obvious exhaustion. Defeated by logic, Claire reluctantly agrees to go to sleep. Claire politely agrees to rest properly and thanks the group for their understanding. The quiet campsite completely settles down as the weary group finally goes to sleep. Taking his guard duty seriously, Takumi watches over the silent camp by the crackling fire. Staring into the flames, he desperately wishes there was something he could do to help Claire. Checking his pocket watch, he accurately notes the current late hour of his guard shift. Realizing he has 1 hour left, he suddenly turns toward a sharp rustling sound. A delicate figure slowly emerges from the darkness of the surrounding canvas tents. Takumi gasps in surprise as Claire approaches and gently thanks them for keeping watch. Concerned for her health, he quickly asks if she is having a hard time sleeping. Shaking her head softly, Claire admits that insomnia is not exactly the real issue. She politely asks to sit beside him, and he immediately welcomes her to join him. Taking a seat gracefully on the rough ground, she warmly thanks him for his kindness. Observing her hesitant demeanor, Takumi silently deduces that something heavy is weighing on her mind. Fidgeting slightly with her clothes, she nervously breaks the comfortable silence between them. Gazing at him intently, she quietly confesses that she has something important to discuss. Gazing at him intently, Claire quietly confesses she has something important to discuss. She hesitates briefly, nervously gathering the courage to share her true thoughts with him. Nodding softly, she confirms her deep desire to finally open up. The warm campfire crackles loudly in the tense silence between them. Breaking the heavy quiet, she gently calls out Takumi's name. She thanks him for bringing her, though he casually dismisses his own helpfulness. Refusing his modesty, Claire passionately insists on properly expressing her deep gratitude. She firmly credits him for their successful arrival in the dangerous woods. Startled by her intense sincerity, Takumi quietly murmurs her noble title. Shifting uncomfortably, Claire admits there is another heavy matter weighing on her mind. She stammers slightly, bringing up her initial forceful request to explore the forest. She reveals that Sebastian harshly scolded her afterward, completely shocking Takumi. The butler correctly argued that Takumi could not safely refuse a direct noble request. She deeply apologizes for weaponizing her status to exploit his kind personality. Brushing off the guilt, Takumi admits he simply struggles to reject pleas for help. Unconvinced, Claire firmly states she severely abused her noble authority by imposing on him. She explains that dukes face strict prohibitions against issuing baseless orders to commoners. Squeezing her clothes tightly, she trembles with immense, overwhelming guilt. Staring into the fire, she cries that her selfish actions brought shame to her family. A heavy, somber silence completely blankets the gloomy nighttime campsite. Seeking a quick distraction, Takumi softly calls out to his giant companion. Startled by the sudden noise, Claire watches the massive wolf spring into action. The giant beast gently rests her heavy, fluffy head directly in Claire's lap. Smiling warmly, Takumi encourages the distressed noblewoman to pet the comforting wolf. Relieved by the sweet gesture, Claire softly agrees and begins stroking the thick fur. The calming warmth of the majestic beast instantly soothes her troubled, anxious heart. Watching her expression soften, Takumi mentally celebrates the return of her bright smile. He gently assures her that the perceived noble order never actually bothered him. He confidently declares he knows she never maliciously intended to boss him around. Pausing briefly, he prepares to offer one final, important piece of reassurance. Takumi muses that granting a pretty lady's request is never a bad thing for a guy. Voicing his thoughts aloud, he instantly causes the flustered noblewoman to blush furiously. A deep, embarrassed redness completely takes over Claire's typically composed face. Still feeling guilty, she nervously asks if he is truly okay with her imposing. Takumi offers to call them even if she simply explains her true motivations. Startled by the fair compromise, Claire stares back in wide-eyed surprise. Letting out a soft sigh, she finally relents and agrees to share her secret. Staring into the fire, she confesses she has no actual interest in the woods. She clarifies her true goal is finding native Silver Fenrirs from this world. Intrigued, Takumi asks why she remains so intensely obsessed with the legendary beasts. Claire explains her fixation stems from a strange childhood rumor spread by estate servants. Hooked by the mysterious premise, Takumi eagerly prompts her to continue the story. She reveals the servants fully believed she was the Libet family founder's reincarnation. Confused by the grand claim, Takumi asks what sparked such a wild theory. Claire explains the bizarre belief originated directly from the first head's historical portraits. She notes her infant portrait looked completely identical to the founder's childhood paintings. Shocked, Takumi suddenly realizes the legendary, fearless family founder was actually a woman. Claire confirms this, adding she grew up perfectly mirroring the historical paintings. Consequently, the hopeful servants heavily expected her to bring immense prosperity to their family. The campfire crackles as Takumi curiously asks what her father thought of the rumors. Smiling warmly, Claire reveals her father completely dismissed the absurd reincarnation theory. He encouraged her to ignore the heavy expectations and live freely as herself. Takumi warmly praises her father for being such a wonderful and supportive parent. Claire agrees his support helped her grow, but a lingering doubt still remains. Gripping her dress, she admits hearing about Silver Fenrirs inexplicably makes her heart race. Claire explains she must explore the woods to understand her rising emotions about the Silver Fenrir. Takumi points out there is no guarantee they will find another Silver Fenrir besides Leo. Startled, Takumi asks if she would simply give up if their search yields absolutely nothing. Claire solemnly agrees, noting her expedition has already heavily inconvenienced too many people. She admits she constantly questions the actual usefulness of seeking more Silver Fenrirs after this. She declares she will take an unsuccessful search as a definitive sign to finally move on. Gripping her dress, she confesses she blindly allowed the servants' baseless rumors to sway her. Takumi gazes at her sympathetically, softly calling out her name in the quiet night. She apologizes for oversharing, but Takumi warmly reassures her he is glad to know. Smiling softly, Claire sincerely praises Takumi for being such an incredibly kind person. Swearing absolute secrecy, Takumi promises he and Leo will never tell a single soul. Deeply relieved by his promise, Claire graciously thanks both of her loyal companions. Eager to chat, Takumi cheerfully offers to keep talking if she is not tired yet. Suddenly, a tall figure approaches the firelight and formally calls out their names. Philip arrives to relieve them, reminding Claire she should turn in for the night. He playfully warns that Sebastian will scold her if she refuses to rest properly. Pausing briefly, Philip softly tells the young noblewoman not to dwell on the past. He proudly declares that he and Sebastian serve her strictly for who she is. Flustered by his eavesdropping, Claire blushes furiously while Philip innocently feigns total ignorance. Though eager to interrogate the sneaky guard, Takumi suggests they finally head to bed. Leaving the campsite in Philip's capable hands, Takumi tells him to take it easy. As they part ways, Takumi suddenly stops and reaches into his pockets. He quickly calls out Claire's name to grab her attention before she leaves. Curious, she turns around just as he gently hands her something small. He offers her mysterious herbs, kindly urging her to eat them before sleeping. He explains these cultivated sleeping aids guarantee a perfectly restful and refreshing night. Intrigued by his magical research, Claire eagerly requests to learn more about it sometime. Wishing each other a good night, they finally retire to their respective tents. The quiet campsite remains completely peaceful as the exhausted group sleeps soundly. Startled by a sudden rustling, Takumi wakes up to find Sebastian standing nearby. The butler warmly thanks the young man for diligently keeping watch over the camp. Narrowing his eyes, Takumi suspiciously asks if Sebastian was also secretly listening in earlier. Admitting his guilt, Sebastian sighs he never knew the rumors troubled her so deeply. He expresses profound gratitude to Takumi for patiently hearing out his young mistress's worries. Sebastian chuckles softly, hoping her heart feels much lighter after finally venting her frustrations. Bowing gracefully, the loyal butler bids Takumi a good night's sleep. The bright morning sun rises, illuminating the dense canopy of the treacherous Fenrir forest. Fully refreshed, Takumi energetically declares it is finally time to begin their grand search. Takumi outlines the search teams, splitting the heavily armed guards to secure the campsite. With their strategy set, the main group confidently marches deeper into the untamed wilderness. The group cautiously navigates through the incredibly dark and dense forest. Sebastian checks on Claire, who confidently declares she isn't tired today. Spotting her friend, Claire excitedly calls out Takumi's name. She enthusiastically thanks him for the herbs, completely rejuvenated. Smiling warmly, Takumi expresses genuine relief that his magical plants worked. Sebastian sighs heavily, noting the pitch-black darkness makes walking treacherous. Reluctantly spending mana, the butler casts a brilliant light spell. The glowing magical orb instantly illuminates their dark, shadowy path. Sebastian explains the spell is simple enough for Takumi to learn. Eager to learn, Takumi asks the butler for future magic lessons. Claire quickly interrupts, enthusiastically volunteering to teach him magic herself. She beams with absolute joy at the prospect of tutoring him. Sebastian playfully argues his superior teaching experience, sparking a friendly rivalry. Yielding gracefully, Sebastian leaves him to Claire as the fruitless day ends. The exhausted group diligently continues their grueling search on day 2. They push deeper into the dense, unforgiving woodland wilderness. By the third day, morale sinks around a crackling campfire. Claire solemnly acknowledges their 3-day search has yielded absolutely nothing. She heavily doubts any Fenrirs actually exist in these woods. Addressing the group, she declares tomorrow will be their final attempt. When Sebastian questions her, she firmly confirms her difficult decision. She gratefully praises everyone for humoring her selfish whims. Sebastian agrees, warning that their mounting weariness increases the danger. Takumi realizes the informed servants desperately want to ease her worries. He warmly reflects on how deeply her loyal staff loves her. The heavy toll of the journey visibly weighs on Takumi. He sighs deeply, finally feeling his own immense physical exhaustion. Turning to his giant wolf, he desperately asks for guidance. He laments their imminent failure, wishing he could somehow help Claire. Leo barks softly and offers her massive paw to her master. A sudden epiphany strikes Takumi as he remembers his herb cultivation.